Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Tailosive Tech Live on YouTube. It's that time of the year again. We've kind of reached the end. Doesn't really feel like Apple's got any last minute tricks up their sleeve or something they're going to drop at the very, very end of December. Apple Music Sing may very well be the last thing Apple drops. Don't worry, there's no singing today. But I bet some people were probably already curious just because this did win the poll for Tailosive Tech Plus members. People voted on what videos I was going to make at the start of this week, and this was in the lead. And I thought for a while whether or not I wanted to do a live stream for it or an edited video. To be clear, I've got it queued up here and we can watch it, but I have not seen this. I have not watched the video. I'm basically going to be going into it blind along with you guys. I don't know what was right, what was wrong. I didn't like. So I thought it might be more fun to do live so that you can kind of catch my live reaction to it. And also, once I pulled up the video, I realized it's 16 and a half minutes. So some of you prefer me doing edited reaction videos and stuff, but the point is, when you're doing reaction videos, you can't necessarily just show your reaction. At least that's typically frowned upon. People want to see what you're reacting to and then your response to it. And because I'm the type of guy that usually has a lot of comments and thoughts, it's just going to take so much longer to do an edited reaction video to a 16 and a half minute video because I'm going to be pausing, adding things, side comments, pausing again. So it probably would have ended up becoming like a 30 to 40 minute edited video anyway. And I'm like, if it's going to take this long to edit it and react to it and everything, I might as well just do it live. Because you're kind of defeating the point of having an edited video anyway, which is to keep things somewhat short and concise. So yeah, I'm excited to watch it. I don't think very much of it is accurate. Like the thumbnail, which I pulled up here, which is funny to look at. This is what it was. I uploaded it back in early January. We have something that kind of looks like a dynamic island. We have a short Mac Pro. Neither of these things really happened. I guess the iPhone design not changing was pretty accurate. I mean, it's got a camera bump, it's got LiDAR. Um, I don't know if this concept art even shows the SIM card slot. So that may have ended up being more accurate than we originally expected to. And I have lost weight. That is correct. It's always kind of inspiring. It's nice to be on the opposite end of that, right? When you look at an old picture of yourself and you're like, oh, I don't weigh that much anymore. I know what it's also like to be in the inverse, where, wow, I used to look so much better. I know what that's like, so that's always fun to react to. But yeah, I actually looked it up because we did this last year. It's kind of become a Tailosive Tech tradition where we react to the predictions video at the end of the year. And I looked it up, and I actually did a live stream for the 2021 predictions too. So I was like, okay, it's not too much of a break from the norm. If anything, we've kind of normalized the doing a live reaction. But predictions videos are easier to do edited because you just kind of make a bunch of guesses based on rumors and speculation, and you can cut that down. But reactions require you to literally show the entire prediction video plus add your reaction. So, good morning, Samuel. Oh, Alpha says he already watched it. Why did you have to ask us to go into another recession for the 20? Is that what I said? Oh, don't spoil it. I haven't watched it yet. I have literally not seen this once since I recorded it, so I'm going in blind. Do you want my 14 Pro Max box for the studio? That's nice of you, but I don't have a good way for you to ship it to me. I don't want to reveal my location for all of you. Sorry. Do you want... but I appreciate you asking. Thank you. Let's make a poll on which is our favorite 2022 Apple products. Yeah, there's usually a couple just contenders that are at the top of most people's, but I just wanted to preface as to why this is a live stream, not an edited video, and also give some time for the notifications to go out so that people can actually start from the beginning. Good morning! Good morning, Michael Burkhardt. Let's see. Oh, the 2020, not 2022. Okay. Yeah, that was, you watched the one from several years ago. Can you guys believe 2023 is less than 3 weeks away? Less than 3 weeks in 2022. AR VR is coming. 2023 will not be boring. I'm sorry, all of the people that claimed it's coming next year are all now saying it's been pushed back to the end of 2023. And then once we reach summer of 2023, they're all going to say it's been pushed to early 2024. They've pushed it back like 4 years in a row now. And also, I find AR and VR stuff kind of boring. Hate to break it to you. Yeah, I agree with Zolt's. AirPods Pro 2 is the best product of 2022. But okay, I think we've got enough people in here to start. I'm actually playing it back just from QuickTime. This is not from YouTube. That way it's easier on T-Mobile, which I will update you guys. T-Mobile did have a little bit of a freak out a couple days ago. It's been very stable. It waited until I said something nice about it. And then once I said, T-Mobile's been very consistent lately, it went out. Luckily, not while I was working, but we were watching a TV show a couple nights ago, and the internet just shut off. Unplugged the gateway, plugged it back in, and now it's working again. But in case we have another freak out live, I decided to just react to the QuickTime file, which, because I edited this video on my MacBook Pro, it's still on here. I hadn't moved it off. And obviously, I was in Puerto Rico at the time. Lots of people thought this was a green screen. I promise you, I kid you not, this is real. Those are real bananas. And there were times where in certain videos you can actually see iguanas crawling on this tree in the background. I don't think it's in this video, but I did struggle with wind noise quite regularly. I should watch The Walking Dead. I've got so many shows to watch, I can't get around it. I tried to watch The Walking Dead, but I couldn't get into it. Anyway, let's go. Let's begin. You guys should be able to hear it, and let's see what I say.
All the excitement on my trip, I forgot to do my Apple 2022 predictions, of course, which we'll be reacting to in 2023. We're at the very
oh,
end
no.
of 2022, so...
I'm doing it too early. I thought I did the... Yeah, I looked it up. My last live stream when I did the reactions, I think was in December, not... But, okay.
Hey, Drew. What's it like out there? How's life going? But yeah, essentially we have
good.
Lots of different subjects to cover across.
Thanks for asking, Drew. I appreciate it. I didn't quite align myself, but...
Different product categories, so without further ado, let's begin.
Hey, there's our old intro. We did change
Probably
that.
address first things first and just talk about what's probably the most exciting part of 2022 with Apple. And I think, once again, it's probably still going to be Apple Silicon and more Macs. What's different about 2022, though, even though we've seen Apple Silicon get really fast with the M1 and even faster with M1 Pro and M1 Max, is that we should finally see what Apple can do with their architecture unleashed. Every single chip we've seen has been very, very impressive, but Apple has always had to find a way to stuff it into a laptop. And I think that has always meant power efficiency is prioritized.
That's right.
And that
this
means
was pre-Ultra.
Make the CPUs and GPUs as crazy fast as they could if it was just in a dedicated desktop tower. And that's what the Mac Pro is supposed to be. I mean, they might prioritize power efficiency a little bit, but the only winning argument you're going to have there is like, this is a little bit less on your power bill, and this is so power efficient it means we can put it into a smaller form factor, I guess.
So I was wrong about the Mac Pro coming out. Clearly we didn't get a Mac Pro, but I am kind of right in the sense that that is what the Mac Studio ended up being. They developed a chip which was basically two M1 Max chips together, and that is exclusive to the Mac Studio. You cannot get the M1 Ultra in a laptop. Now, we tested that out. We got the most powerful Mac ever, and I didn't find the performance to be drastically better in many circumstances. There was like, I forget what it was, but inherent limitations to how well the M1 chip scales when you have that many cores working in tandem. But my argument was like, the only argument you can make of better power efficiency with desktops is like it's lower on your electric bill. That's literally what Apple said, though. When they unveiled the Mac Studio, they were like, this will use like 1,000 kilowatt hours less energy than a PC over the course of a year, which would directly save you money, I guess, depending on what electricity rates are in your area. Regardless of what they cost, I guess that is a little bit cheaper. So Mac Studio kind of ended up being what I wanted the Mac Pro to be. Like, I think the Mac Studio is a lot more practical, a lot more relatable than $8,000 to $50,000 Mac Pros. But yeah, I thought that this was going to be the year of the Mac Pro, and I guess it wasn't.
some people would like, but I know there's a ton of PC guys out there and Mac people too that are just in favor of having the biggest computer possible because big computer means fast, powerful. Some people don't even want efficiency if it was offered to them just because they want something that can soak up every last watt and turn that into a really, really powerful Mac that can export all of their highly intensive 8K video and all that. But still, there's more to come with Apple Silicon, and knowing that we haven't reached the full potential yet does get me excited. So of course, in March, we're looking at iMac Pro, which will likely be rocking M1 Pro or M1 Max. And then
I forgot there was still this expectation that we were going to get an iMac Pro back in January. Wow. It's an incredible how much is wrong, honestly. Already in March, we thought there was going to be an iMac Pro. It's the end of the year, and we're still like not anywhere close to expecting an iMac Pro. Every last what? Can you believe that Dub and the MacBook Air redesign was already half a year ago? Yeah, that is kind of crazy, huh?
sometime in the summer, maybe even later in the fall, we'll see a redesigned Mac Pro with Apple Silicon that doesn't have to be put into a laptop at any time soon.
So while we did get the Mac Studio, it is funny to think that back in January, I was like, I can't wait to see what I can't wait to see what Apple Silicon can do fully unleashed and fully unlocked, and we're waiting for the Mac Pro, and then at the end of the year we're still thinking the same thing. Boy, I can't wait till it's fully unleashed. It's like, this is taking a lot longer than we thought. Jeez.
Certainly one of the most interesting things in my view, just because we've never seen Apple designing silicon for a Mac that big. But of course, there's other things to talk about as well. For my own personal uses, I'm very excited to see a refreshed Pro Display XDR because I've been using my MacBook Pro a lot and it's fantastic. But when I am at home at the desk, I would like a larger screen to edit all my videos on. Plus, when I'm doing live streaming and stuff, having more space for the chat and OBS and all those windows I'm going to be managing would breathe so much better if it wasn't on a little 16-inch display. You know that.
And I still feel the same way. I mean, on trips like this one, you know, I can't take an external monitor with me. It's just not practical. So I'm still just kind of accustomed and gotten used to doing everything on this little 16-inch display. But it's because the display is literally the best panel I've ever seen. High refresh rate, mini LED, just such rich colors, great brightness. And every external monitor I try is just not as good. So actually, the way I'm compromising on this right now, I don't know if I was doing it back in January, but I think I was still considering selling the iMac Pro or trading in the iMac Pro for Apple Store credit, or moving the iMac Pro to a different room to use as like my wife's dedicated computer. But that just never... I think we tried selling it, or we tried trading it in, and we even tried setting it up in the different room for my wife and stuff, and we just couldn't find a good use for it. My wife just didn't really need a desktop all that much. She's happy using her phone or iPad, and the trade-in values were crap. The resale values were crap, to the point that I'm actually using my iMac Pro pretty regularly. I'm actually reading the chat on it right now. So most of the advantages to having a larger display, I've just decided it's more cost effective to keep using my iMac Pro, because there isn't like my dream monitor out there, which is just disappointing rewatching this video, seeing me say, I can't wait for Apple to do an updated version of the Pro Display XDR, is like, I'm still waiting for that, because all of the external monitors I can buy are going to be 60 hertz or not going to be as high a pixel density, or they're not going to be as good as the mini LED on my MacBook. So I just want something that can retain the high quality look of my MacBook Pro, just bigger, and Apple still hasn't complemented it. So basically, if I'm going to be stuck with a compromised monitor experience of some kind anyway, then I might as well just keep the iMac Pro around. It's also, I will admit, it was very nice to have a backup Mac to test macOS beta on. So because I use my MacBook Pro way too much for work, I'm not willing to put a beta on it, because it just is too sketchy if you run into boot loops or issues where you can't switch back. I've had that happen in the past with my iMac Pro. Back when that was my daily editing machine, we put the beta on it, and then Final Cut broke and I couldn't edit videos off it. So I had to have a backup Mac. And so having two Macs for the sake of software testing is kind of nice. I do appreciate being able to test the new macOS versions as they come out, so I can just kind of throw them on the iMac Pro, because all I'm really using the iMac Pro for is, again, testing software and live chat. You know, it's 60 hertz, it's got a big chin and everything, but I often use it like as a TV. If I'm watching a video while I'm working on something, then it doesn't really matter if it's not ProMotion, because most of the content I'm watching is either going to be 30 or 60 FPS. Or if I'm doing something like I am right now, live reacting to something on my MacBook display, okay, that means the video I'm reacting to has to take up the entire MacBook panel, but I need something to read the chat on, and it's a lot bigger on the iMac Pro than it would be if I tried to put it on like the iPad or something where the chat's pretty small. Plus, I can access the full desktop version of websites on the iMac Pro, so it still bugs me that it's 60 hertz, and I'm kind of used to 120 hertz on all of my other devices, but for the uses of the iMac Pro, the speakers are still very, very good. They're much louder, and they have a lot of bass in them, so if I'm using it as like a dedicated TV, it's good at that, plus reading the chat and that kind of thing. There are ways to transform old iMac to really nice displays, but no iMac Pro supports yet. I don't really need to turn it into an external monitor because of universal control, though. Like with the same keyboard and trackpad or keyboard and mouse that I have connected to my MacBook, I can just move my mouse over. I can drag files over. So I've heard of people doing these big retrofits where you take it apart and you replace ports and stuff and make it into an external monitor, but there's really just no point for me when universal control works so flawlessly anyway. I can have one keyboard and one mouse control both, and they're just separate devices. I have tried using AirPlay to Mac. It's not, the latency is not very good, and the resolution is not very good. Even with a USB-C cable, it's not very usable. The AirPlay is too delayed, and it also severely compromises on the quality of the display. Normally, I don't care about pixel density that much, but I tried it, trust me. As soon as they rolled out AirPlay to Macs, I was like, oh, yes, I want to try to use this as an external monitor. Tried it with a cable, tried it wireless, and yeah, it's bad. It's kind of like Sidecar on the iPad. Like, in some circumstances, it's kind of nice, but then it runs into these, like, compression issues, and you can't specifically tell the device to use the cable. You just have to trust that macOS knows what to do. But anyway, I'm happy with the current setup I have for the most part. Obviously, it would be nice to just have a dedicated monitor that's prettier than the iMac Pro that has ProMotion. That way, the one downside of this setup is I cannot edit my videos on the big screen because that would require AirPlay. Basically, everything else, though, watching a video or reading the chat, all of that I can do on the iMac Pro while I'm editing on the MacBook Pro. But that one use case of just editing videos on the bigger screen, that would be nice. But I don't know how much extra I'm willing to pay for it. You know, I still want Apple to refresh the Pro Display, but I don't know if, you know, it's $4,000, $5,000. Is that one use case worth it? You know, I could maybe justify it for $3,000, but I have a hard time believing they'll get the price that low. Chris says, where are you at the moment? You said you're away. I'm still home right now, but I'm reacting to a video I recorded back in January, which was in Puerto Rico. So anyway, I better let myself keep talking. Let's go. Let's listen.
Big as Apple's mobile displays get,
Windy,
definitely
sorry.
nowhere near as big as the 27-inch iMac Pro I was used to using. So 120 hertz on a Pro display that's half the price, certainly up there, and I'm excited for that. Although if I have to go down my predictions route, I'm probably going to be disappointed with this just because I was so disappointed with the last standalone monitor. Wouldn't be shocked if it ends up costing closer to $3,000-$4,000. Maybe it doesn't go down in price at all. They just include a stand now and it's still $5,000, in which case, cool. I'm sure the refresh rate in XDR will be nice, but not for me. And of course, a lot of people are still excited for the M2 MacBook
There
Air
it is.
because this is the first time the MacBook Air is getting some kind of chassis redesign since 2018, which doesn't sound like that long ago until you realize we're going to hit the 4-year mark on that soon. So seeing MacBooks get even thinner and lighter, and how Apple would design a laptop from the ground up if they knew they didn't have to put any fans in it and had complete control over the thermal architecture, that should be pretty interesting. I'm actually going to go out on a limb and predict that it will have black bezels and a notch, and the white bezel rumor ends up just not working.
Yes! Oh my god, we found something I made a prediction that ended up happening. Finally, it only took 4 minutes. So the M2 chip, in my opinion, ended up being a pretty big disappointment. Not much faster than the M1. Awful thermal constraints involved with it. and just ultimately very similar architecture performance to the M1. It could be possibly because we were so spoiled by the jump of the M1 that our expectations for Mac upgrades were just so high because going from Intel to M1 was such a big improvement. But going from M1 to M2, on top of that, keeping the 5 nanometer architecture means that it can't be that more efficient. M2 is basically just an M1 chip overclocked, which when you put it in a thermally constrained chassis means that it can't really get much faster. And the M2 MacBook Air I tested actually ended up destroying one of our podcasts because the chip overheated and corrupted the file. It was not able to just record a simple podcast. Um, so that was definitely a bummer. But at this time, in January, we all thought there was going to be a white bezeled MacBook Air. And did I say it would have a notch?
Over the thermal architecture. That should be pretty interesting. I'm actually going to go out on a limb and predict that it will have black bezels and a notch, and the white bezel rumor ends up just not working. It's just all of the logic Apple has applied to the 24-inch iMac having white bezels. It's all about like fitting in with the living room or fitting in with the kitchen with the white backdrops and the white walls with drywall and all that. And I just don't think that same argument is going to hold up as well in the MacBook Air territory. And that's why Apple has ditched white bezels across the entire iPad lineup. Now, even the silver budget iPad has black bezels. So this argument that the cheap lower tier Macs should have white bezels doesn't really line up with the iPad design scheme. So a notch, yes, just like the MacBook Pros, because this new MacBook Air is supposed to have mini LED, but still 60 hertz. And the M2 chip will mostly be a boost in graphics, not too much a boost in actual CPU performance, which will be fine because the M1, in terms of like fanless laptop designs, is still pretty much untouched in regards to performance.
I guess that was partially true.
Apple knows that. Of course, we might also get a refreshed 13-inch MacBook Pro, or maybe just a skimmed down 14-inch MacBook Pro. I still expect that to come out in the third or fourth quarter, so we've got a ways to go till then. But yes,
it actually came out sooner. That came out in the second quarter, or no, third quarter is June, right? That came out in June. So yeah, we did get an M2 13-inch MacBook Pro. I guess I thought there was a chance of a 14-inch MacBook Pro coming at a lower price, but that didn't happen.
The touch bar, it will probably have the M2 chip, so the M1 Pro will still be entry price of
that was correct. That happened.
Unless maybe in the next couple months Apple launches a Mac Mini, possibly that's $1,100 or more, that starts with the M1 Pro, and maybe you can spec it out to an M1 Max.
That
would
be
awesome. I know a ton of people would buy that, but I'm not counting on it because I think Apple knows the Mac Mini would sell way too well, and that's why they're prioritizing the iMac Pro to come out first, and maybe the Mac Mini at the very end of the year. But if Apple is planning on refreshing the entry-level MacBook Pro, the MacBook Air, those were launched at the end of 2020 with the M1 Mac Mini. So if Apple wants some consistency with these launch cycles, it would probably launch the M2 or M1 Pro Mac Mini along with those MacBooks as well. In regards to iPads, I think it actually should be kind of a stale year. I mean, we got the iPad Mini 6 and iPad Minis, unfortunately, are not refreshed annually. But we do get budget iPads every year. I feel like every single year that goes by, I'm like, maybe this year they'll give it a laminated display, and then they don't do it. So I'm just going to go ahead and taper my expectations and say the next generation budget iPad will still have a non-laminated display, but
that's correct.
We'll get another random CPU boost and maybe some camera updates here and there for higher megapixel count and that kind of thing.
I think it did get a megapixel boost.
Non-laminated display process is what is able to make that iPad so cheap, and every time they try to design it in a laminated way, it just doesn't work. They can't get it under that price point. So iPad Air 5, however, that's
that iPad 10 basically prediction ended up being half wrong because I was not anticipating them to redesign it. I thought they were just going to keep the iPad 9 design but give it a CPU boost and some camera enhancements. But we ended up getting a lot worse than that. But arguably, if you just hated the home button and wanted USB-C, I guess it was a bigger deal than expected. I forgot the iPad Air 5 came out this year. At the time of recording this video, the Air 5 didn't exist yet. Did I predict the iPod being dropped from the lineup? I don't know. I haven't watched the full video yet. Hasael says, "Be careful. I'm worried this YouTuber will strike you for copyright." That would be hilarious. I hope he strikes me. M2 is disappointing compared to M1, but M2 is still a 20% performance gain, which is a lot more than the most. I know that's what it says on paper. Apple claims it's a 20% performance gain. It's just in the real world, I didn't see that. I know that in a lab somewhere they tested the M2, and at certain wattages it was 20% faster, but in real world performance it usually never was that much faster. And there was the big read and write drama because the M2 chip was coupled with the um, single not SSD, sorry, single NANDs, which meant that the read and write speed on the base model was slower. That was kind of coupled with the M2 chip launch, which made it hard to recommend because it was like, in many circumstances, the M2 will actually perform worse than the M1. In other circumstances, the M2 will perform better. But anyway, let's check out what I thought iPad Air 5 was going to do.
Very, very likely to come out in 2022, but sounds like all rumors as of lately of OLED iPads have been pushed back. So Apple still wants to eventually switch to OLED on iPads.
There's actually a news report about this morning from Ross Young. Apple could release OLED iPad with Samsung in 2024. Yeah, I think Ross Young just dropped a news report saying, yes, there's going to be OLED iPads and I think MacBooks in 2024, but that's been rumored for a long time. That's been pushed back several years now. So hopefully 2024 is actually the year.
It's not going to be in 2022, which means the iPad Air 5, sadly, will probably still have that same 10.9-inch LCD display, but it will likely just be caught up with the rest of the iPad lineup. So center stage, 5G support for those who care about that type of thing. Maybe a handful of new color options that kind of match the iPad Mini 6. Ooh, Starlight now. And of course, center stage, which it still really bugs me that they can't put that on the iPad Air when they've already put it on the budget iPad. Makes no sense. It's only a matter of time. Of course, center stage is coming to the iPad Air 5. Probably throw in an A13 chip or better in there, just so it's...
I was really wrong. I said A13. I meant A15, and then it got the M1. This was like, I guess, a few months before that rumor came out. Oh, thank you for the super chat, Ben. He says, would have been amazing if you predicted the Mac Studio before they even announced it. I never would have predicted that. To me, the Mac Studio was still very much not the type of Mac Apple would make. Like, at the beginning of this year, you could tell I was all on board the idea that Apple was going to do an iMac Pro. Because if you put the M1 Pro or M1 Max chip, similar to how they didn't put the M1 Pro and M1 Max in a Mac Mini, they just put it in the MacBook Pros, and that was the only way to access the fastest Apple Silicon. I was like, okay, it's because they want to prioritize higher margin, higher revenue products. And by putting the M1 Pro or M1 Max into a little desktop tower, that's not going to be as profitable. Like, that's going to be too cheap. They need to put it in an iMac Pro. That way they can justify charging $2,500 or $3,000 for it because they couple it with this great display and all these ports and say, see, this is the best desktop you can buy and you're just going to have to wait for the Mac Pro. That's how the old Mac lineup was. The Mac Mini always got crappy chips. If you wanted a better performance than the Mac Mini, you had to get a 27-inch iMac or an iMac Pro. But if you wanted a dedicated tower that was faster than the Mac Mini, you had to go with the Mac Pro. So I was not anticipating Apple to not do a iMac Pro or a higher end iMac than the 24-inch, but instead make a basically Mac Mini Pro that's taller than the Mac Mini, that has way better silicon, way better ports, that Apple deems as modular, as Mike is saying. And I totally did not think they would do that, but they did it. M1 and the iPad Air 5 was an extremely last-minute leak. I remember that, yeah, and there were a lot of people doubting it. I remember when that first came out, and everyone was like, no, there's no way they would put that fast a chip in the iPad Air. I remember believing it, though. I was like, that actually sounds like Apple. And people were like, why would you get the Pro then? And I kept saying, Face ID, 120 hertz. There's all these reasons, or Thunderbolt and the better camera. There's all these reasons to still get a Pro, but the Air getting the M1 made sense once I heard the report. But at this time, there was no leak about that. It was still considered pretty mind-boggling and pretty insane that you would put an M series chip in a $600 iPad. But yeah, that's what ended up happening.
The date with the iPad Mini as well as the Flash. Not sure why the iPad Mini deserves the Flash and the iPad Air 5 doesn't, but maybe Apple knows people are trying to use the iPad Mini as a phone and stuffing it in a...
I'm already blanking. I can't remember. You guys are going to tell me by the time I look this up, but did the iPad Air 5 get Flash? No, it didn't. Oh, no, yes, it did. Sorry. I just pulled up the website here. Yeah. They did bring the Flash to the... Oh, wait. What? What am I looking at? No, it didn't. These renders are confusing. Okay. Apple's website... I Can't make up my mind. Apple's website makes it hard to look at the camera bump on the iPad Air 5. They're always just throwing it everywhere. But no, it did not get the flash, which is interesting. Apple is like, iPad mini, which is cheaper, gets the flash because small, so it's more likely to be used as a flashlight, whereas the iPad Air didn't. So I guess that was the logic I was using in the video.
At some time. So it's a stupid reason, but that might be what it is. If the iPad Air 5 doesn't have flash, we'll know that's what Apple's going for. Also, if iPad Pro launch cycles line up like they used to, we should technically be getting new iPad Pros by the end of this year. I'm just very confused as to what their plans are for them. Like maybe bringing mini LED to the 11-inch model and perhaps throwing in the M2 chip because of course the M1 chip is just way too slow for iPad OS.
They did
Aside from that, I really can't think of much else they can do. I mean, there was talks of them adopting OLED displays, but those have now again been pushed back. They could update the cameras a little bit to kind of match the performance that the iPhone 13 cameras are rocking, but cameras on iPads, everyone agrees, is somewhat overkill and unnecessary, but still,
they did get ProRes support, and they did get the M2 chip. That was an easy guess, but the ProRes doesn't even work through the native camera app. You have to download a third-party application, so yeah, I was correct in assuming. I don't know what they're going to do about the M2 iPad Pros. Like, what do you change? Apple didn't know either. Barely changed anything.
Going to give iPad OS any Pro apps or any Mac functionality, and I guess crazy overkill hardware is kind of the only direction the iPad Pro can go in. Gurman's talked about giving it glass backs with wireless charging and reverse wireless charging, but with the use of the Magic Keyboard case, I'm really unsure of how wireless charging is supposed to work comfortably with iPads. So I don't think glass backs are going to be that good of an upgrade feature unless maybe there's some design overhaul with the chassis where we're going to get...
I'm so glad that ended up not happening. I felt crazy because literally like everybody in the leak community was saying that the iPad Pros were getting wireless charging, and I kept doing videos saying that's the dumbest idea, like this is really stupid, and thankfully that didn't make it to market. However, the real iPad Pro ended up being very disappointing and not worth it, but I would still rather have a boring, non-worth it upgrade than Apple overcomplicate it and make it a glass back with wireless charging, and you got to buy new wireless chargers, or you got to buy new Magic Keyboard cases. They could have done it much worse. Instead, the M2 iPad Pro ended up being just a very easy, this isn't worth it, don't buy it, just buy the M1 iPad Pro, which you can find refurbished or renewed elsewhere. You can find them on sale, and it will basically be the exact same process because same experience, because there is so little use cases to where the M1 iPad Pro will feel noticeably slower than the M2. Basically, the biggest thing you would notice is the Apple Pencil hover feature, but that is a software limitation. That's not a hardware thing. I am not convinced at all that you need the M2 chip for that feature to work, which does mean that even if you really care about Apple Pencil hover now, there's a chance they might software update the iPad M1 version in the future and give it that feature. But like, hey, we figured it out or something. Katrina says they're still doing an Intel Mac Mini, so obviously they plan to have something to replace it. No, that's not necessarily true. There was a time, briefly, I think, where they were selling the 24-inch iMac and the 27-inch iMac, which the 27-inch was Intel and the 24-inch was Apple Silicon. And then later down the road, when they refreshed the Mac Studio and the Studio display, they just killed the 27-inch iMac. They didn't replace it with anything. I think they could do something very similar with the Mac Mini. I don't want them to necessarily, but I'm saying they could do something similar where I think the reason they're still selling the Intel Mac Mini is just because they have a bunch in stock. I think someone told me, this could be wrong, but I think someone told me that the processors that are going in the Intel Mac Mini, which is very old now, it's like a 3 or 4 year old Mac Mini that hasn't been refreshed, the space gray one, Intel is not making those chips anymore, which means that the fact that Apple is still selling that Intel Mac Mini means that they're probably not producing new ones, which makes sense to me. The M1 chip is far, far better, and I don't know anybody at this point. The CPUs they're putting in the Intel Mac Mini that cost $1,100 are terrible compared to what's available today. Like, just get a refurbished Mac Studio or an M1 Mac Mini. Like, either one of those is going to be a better buy than the Intel Mac Mini. My guess is they just have a bunch of those Mac Minis in stock, the space gray ones. I don't think they're actually building them. And at any time, If some company for some reason was just like, we need a bunch of Mac Minis with 4 Thunderbolt ports, and the M1 doesn't have 4 Thunderbolt ports, and the Mac Studio is too expensive or too big, it doesn't fit in our server slots. At some point, they might just update the website and say available while supplies last. So yeah, there was a time where they were selling. Was it Michael? Okay, yeah, there. It was probably you. Nothing gets past you, but um, yeah, I'm pretty convinced that they're not manufacturing those Mac Minis. The only reason they're selling them. Same thing with the Mac Pro. How many people are buying the Intel Mac Pro right now? Especially when the Mac Studio exists. Apple has confirmed the existence of the Apple Silicon Mac Pro. It's not a leak. It's not a rumor. Like uh, Apple executives literally said in a keynote, all that's left now is Mac Pro. And that was like 9 months ago. So everybody who knows anything about Apple knows that there is a new Mac Pro coming at some point, hopefully within the next year at least. So to be dropping $8,000 to $50,000 on an Intel Mac Pro now, it's got to be a very niche use case or a very weird business that is like, we need x86 architecture, we need Intel. I don't understand the whole appeal of the Mac Pro at all, because the whole way it was over engineered the way it was is because it's so modular, you can upgrade it over time. But it's like, yeah, but over time it's going to become progressively and progressively dated compared to the ARM hardware that's available with M1 Ultra and the 3 nanometer process around the corner. I don't think Apple's leaving the Intel Mac Pro up there because that many people are buying it. I'm pretty sure the only reason it's on the site is because they have a bunch in stock and they need to get rid of them. So they're just putting it up there. I don't think they're manufacturing new Mac Pros. I could be wrong, but my guess is that basically all Intel Mac production is halted. I don't think there's any new ones. But anyway, let's move on.
Bezels and more modern approach to iPad Pro somehow. At the end of the day, between my iPhone, my watch, and my MacBook, the iPad Pro now has the thickest bezels. So maybe if we're going to continue this war on bezels, that's the direction Apple needs to go in. As far as iPhones go, we should be starting off the year with quite a boring upgrade, because the iPhone SE 3rd generation basically just have an A15 chip and 5G. And really nothing else. No upgrades to the camera, no upgrades to the display, the design. There haven't even really been reports if it's going to adopt MagSafe or not, which at this point, Apple launching an iPhone in 2022 without MagSafe sounds bizarre. So I'm still going to predict that they will adopt MagSafe somehow on this dated design.
It was worse than I thought. But that leak in January ended up being exactly right. The SE3 was, in my opinion, the worst iPhone SE upgrade of all time. It was just slap 5G, slap an A15 chip, and they raised the price, which I don't think I predicted or expected.
They can upsell you on a battery pack if the 5G drains your battery, because the capacity on the SE is already really
But I do agree, adding MagSafe would have been a good idea. Like, you need something, right? Like, when we talk about boring, insignificant upgrades like the M1 to the M2 iPad Pro, you could at least make the argument that, well, maybe people who really want Apple Pencil hover support, they could at least justify getting the M2 iPad Pro. You could have at least made the argument with the iPhone SE3. Well, it has MagSafe now, so you can use the MagSafe wallet, you can use the MagSafe battery pack. That way Apple can upsell you, but they didn't even do that. It was like, even from a marketing business perspective, I can't respect it. You also might need Intel because some Microsoft apps don't work well on M1 and M2. Some people, I'm pretty sure all of Microsoft's suite has been updated for ARM. I don't know of anybody's, like, apps that Microsoft supports. But if you're talking about apps that are just available on Windows, then I don't know why you're buying a Mac. What Windows apps work very, very well on x86 Mac, but not on ARM? At this point, I've seen comparisons where the Mac Studio with the M1 Max or M1 Ultra chip, even under emulation, are running apps and games faster than the Intel version. And at this point, if there's still companies after 2 years, over 2 years, that haven't updated the software for ARM, then they're shooting themselves in the foot. Like, Apple has been very upfront about this. Apple's been very clear. This is the direction we're going. It is an objectively better. Microsoft apps don't work well on any Mac or Windows PC. But like, I don't know anybody that would be like a diehard x86 supporter at this point. Like, objectively, ARM means that you can buy cheaper hardware. You don't have to drop $20,000 on a Mac Pro to get good performance anymore. You can buy a Mac Studio for far cheaper. There's so many power and cost advantages to optimizing your apps for ARM. If you haven't done it yet, I don't know why that brand or company's thought process would be, let's buy a brand new Mac Pro now. It's like ridiculous. Mike says Excel works great on Mac from my experience. Apple doesn't put the MagSafe on SE3 because it would be cannibalizing sales. Right. That's the whole reason. It's another decoy effect. What do you think the Apple Intel Mac Mini? Do you think that one will get replaced with an M2 Pro Mac Mini? I don't. I think they'll just tell you to get the Mac Studio. I think that eventually we'll get an M2 Mac Mini, but that'll just replace the M1 Mac Mini. It's not going to be sold. Well, maybe I shouldn't say that, because the MacBook Air, they still sell the M1 version and the M2 version, but there's a big redesign between those two. I don't expect a big redesign with the M2 Mac Mini. I think it'll look exactly the same as the M1. So if it's going to look exactly the same, it probably doesn't make that much sense to just keep selling the M1, because everyone would just buy that. Have you tried running STEM on M1? The words are so slow. Well, if it's slow on the M1, I'm telling you, it's probably going to be slow on the Intel version. Inflation, they need to up the price, so at least they added features. Yeah, they didn't up the price on any other iPhone, just the cheapest one, which is kind of funny. All right, let's see what else I had to say.
Tiny. It will basically be the boring upgrade that's just for like people who want an iPhone and they don't really care about any of the hardware. They just want the cheapest possible iPhone that's also new. They don't want to buy refurbished or used for some reason. With the iPhone 14
I don't
lineup,
like
there's
that
a lot of
mindset, by the way. I'm trying to fight that in my videos, because I know a lot of people that think that way. They're like, I can't go renew to refurb. I just need to walk into the store and buy something off the shelf. It's like, okay, just realize they're gouging you. Like, you are paying a huge premium if you insist on not buying anything refurbished or secondhand, and you're not missing out on that much of the experience. I was looking up iPhone XRs the other day. You can buy those for $200 now on Amazon. It's amazing. M1 MacBook Air is just there for the sake of starting price at this point. Partially, but I also think that it's still a really good laptop. I would genuinely recommend the M1 MacBook Air to lots of people, and I have. M2 MacBook Air is a very specific market. It's a lot more niche, in my opinion, than the MacBook Pro or the M1 Air. So yeah, I agree. It's there for the starting price, but justifiably. Like, I wouldn't get rid of it. I don't think, similar to how the iPhone 14 is just there for the starting price and not that many people are buying it, I don't feel the same way. Like, the iPhone 14 and 14 Plus, their job is to convince you to buy the 14 Pro by being very boring and kind of expensive. M1 MacBook Air, I don't think it's its job to convince you to buy the M2 MacBook Air. I think its job is just, like, Apple wants to maintain high Mac sales, and so many people love the M1 Air. It's still, like, someone described it the other day. I don't know who it was. It may have been in Discord. But the M1 MacBook Air is the perfected version of the Johnny Ive laptop. Like, Johnny Ive wanted basically something like the 12-inch MacBook, but it was too slow and too weak, and the keyboard sucked, and everybody hated the butterfly design. So the M1 Air is still reminiscent of that Johnny Ive design era. But it's got the ports, it's got the speed, it's got the reliable keyboard. You know, it's not crazy expensive. It's like the best possible version of that era, of like the 2010s. It's kind of dated design now, but I feel like a lot of people buying MacBooks don't really care whether or not there's a notch. Some people hate the notch, in which case the M1 Air arguably has a better design. And the M2 Air is not much lighter. It's a little bit lighter, but not by much. They should have used a beefier heatsink or just used the one that was in the M1 model. I think for the entry-level Mac, it's still an incredible deal, especially if you go refurbished.
Up in the air right now. I mean, from Dylan, leaks right now are suggesting
Dylan,
that we're going to get like a pill-shaped camera cutout instead of a hole punch camera. I'm not really sure if it's going to be because Apple wants an additional sensor with that cutout, or is Apple actually just trying to differentiate themselves from all the Android phones, which basically most of them already have hole punch cameras that are centered. So if the iPhone does that, it kind of blends in with the crowd and doesn't stand out as much anymore. I feel like that's kind of the inevitable future of smartphones anyway, but maybe Apple adopting the pill shape could let them use one Face ID sensor that maybe doesn't work too well underneath the OLED display. So having the pill shape enables them to retain the reliability of Face ID and have something that kind of makes them stand apart from everybody else. It's probably too early to predict, but I'm going to guess the pill-shaped camera hole will happen on the iPhone 14 Pro and 14 Pro Max, and Apple will probably keep the notch for the 14 and 14 Max. So yeah, no mini iPhone this year. It's rumored.
Okay, this is somewhat accurate. Obviously, no one predicted Dynamic Island. That was a total surprise. But they did go with a pill. This was before we had the eye hole rumors. I think actually the eye hole rumors started when I was in Puerto Rico, but this was before that rumor came forward. So they did go with a pill. It was just they found a way to make it so unique and so different from everybody else through software, which is genius. And we were still calling it the 14 Max back then. I didn't think they would revive the 14 Plus, but we were right months and months and months before that there wouldn't be a mini iPhone.
Just be 6.1 inches for the small phones and 6.7 inches for Pro Max and a non-Pro iPhone that just happens to have a larger display. And I'm hoping that comes with a bigger battery as well, because I think that's the primary reason a lot of people end up going with the Pro Max phones is just because they want that better battery. It's not necessarily all about camera. So I think those rumors are going to end up being true. Unfortunately, as much as I want Apple to adopt USB-C, they're probably going to stick with Lightning again, which I think is a mistake. I think it's a missed opportunity, but that's just what I'm predicting here from the get-go. Of course, the A16 chip will be a decent amount faster than the A15 chip, and that will allow them to do cinematic mode at 4K at 60, probably ProRes 4K at 60 as well, so yeah.
Not at 60, but I was correct about cinematic mode getting 4K support. That was an easy guess, but I'm kind of disappointed they still haven't brought 60 FPS to that. I feel like the audience for a 12-inch MacBook Air is also the audience for an iPad. Possibly. There's some overlap there. Yeah. Like the 12-inch MacBook with a downclocked M2, I know I'd give that immediately to my parents. What everyone's forgetting about the 12-inch MacBook is it started at like $1,200 to $1,300. It was not very cheap. So I don't know if that would be a good device for you to be gifting to your parents or people that don't need that much power. What you need is a cheap laptop with good battery life. And that's what the M1 Air is because it reuses so many parts. That's why it's such a good laptop. It's pretty much the only MacBook Air I liked. If you go back and watch my old videos, I didn't really love the old MacBook Airs. Any of the Intel-based ones I was not really a fan of. I didn't even review the 2018 MacBook Air when it got redesigned. And before that, they still had silver bezels for years and years and years. The aluminum bezels were just weird, and I didn't care for the design language of those older ones. The displays weren't that great. You know, I've just never been that big a fan of the MacBook Air until it got the M1 chip. But yeah, the hardware is there for the eye hole. It's just software turned into the dynamic island. So that technically ended up being right.
Expect 1 terabyte iPhones to maybe get more popular when your phone starts recording things and taking up 12 gigs per minute. That's going to need a lot of space, not to mention a very, very high write speed. As far as the Apple Watch lineup goes, I think it might be kind of interesting. We're rumored to get like 3 new versions all at once.
That's true.
One is supposed to be an update to the Apple Watch SE. One is supposed to just be a spec bump, you know, like the one we didn't get last year. And alongside that, a more rugged, durable version, which might end up being that squared off design that we heard so much about in 2021. Maybe that's going to find its way into kind of a uglier but stronger Apple Watch that can be used for rigorous activities like rock climbing, and it's shock resistant, and you can take it super deep in salt water and that type of thing. I don't know how you can make it much more durable than my Series 7 because I've been swimming in the ocean a lot with this thing.
That did happen.
Holding up fine, but several analysts are still saying they expect a rugged Apple Watch of some kind in 2022. So Apple kind of diversifying the spectrum of watches is going to be interesting, and let's really, really hope 2022 is the year the Series 3 dies.
Yay, it was.
Long time ago.
Finally.
For some reason, it's still freaking here. I don't
Congratulations.
get it. We don't need to sell this anymore, Apple. Or if you are going to sell it for like $99 instead of $199. That's just crazy. I'm hoping that the updated Apple Watch SE could also get a price reduction. If that design started at $199, that would be just perfect for the lineup. Just another nail in the coffin.
It didn't get a price reduction. No, it did get a price reduction. It just wasn't $199. M1 MacBook Pro carried me through college. It is so much more powerful than the Intel MacBook Air, so I can see why a MacBook Air was not that much loved by you. Oh, yes, for sure. I just wouldn't recommend the M1 MacBook Pro. I don't think it's much better than the M1 Air. Costs a lot more. The Intel MacBook Airs were very slow, quite bad. I would love for Apple to reconsider their position on the Mini in light of the lagging sales for the Plus, although that might have to do with supply. I'm not sure because an iPhone Mini with USB-C. Yeah, I don't think we're going to get a mini iPhone next year. It's too soon. Apple doesn't change form factors in the lineup. You know, we had the Mini for 2 years, and I think we're going to have the Plus for 2 years. And, you know, we had the iPhone XR design for 2 years. So every 2 years, they tend to recalibrate the lineup and say, what sizes do we want to do? So even though the 14 Plus is selling horribly, I think we're going to get a 15 Plus. But I'm not entirely sure if they want to bring the Mini back. No leaker or no analyst has claimed they're going to bring the Mini back. But I do wonder if the Plus iPhones are increasing the likelihood of people buying a Pro. And if they are, that might be a good enough reason to keep them around as the decoy model. I wouldn't mind it if every couple of years they switched to back to the Mini. Like you do the Plus iPhones for 2 years, then you do the Mini iPhones for 2 years. That way, because, you know, Apple keeps selling last year's model, they're still selling the 13 Mini. In my opinion, it's the best value new iPhone you can buy right now. So, like, keep the Pluses around for 2 years and then go back and do Minis for 2 years. And that way, there's always something in the lineup for people who... There's a niche audience that likes the Plus. I don't know who they are, but someone's like, I don't want a Pro, but I don't care about ProMotion, but I want a big screen. So some people can have the Plus. But, of course, there's a huge demographic, in my opinion, that all wants the Minis. So maybe a way to do both and kind of go back and forth. 14 Plus not selling is absolutely not because of supply chain. Yeah, that's true. They've got a lot of those in stock. The parts that you need to build the 14 Plus are very easy to access because it's not an LTPO. Drew's 2023 predictions leak. No Apple Watch Ultra 2, no Apple VR headset. Why do you think we're not going to get an Apple Watch Ultra 2? I did a whole video on why I think we will get an Apple Watch Ultra 2. Do your own research. Let's see. I went with M1 MacBook Pro because I caught it on site and it was only $50 more than the Air and they had Space Gray in stock. Yeah. $50 more for the Touch Bar. I guess that's reasonable.
For smartwatches that aren't made by Apple. And then with the Series 8 itself, I expect more health sensors and CPU and GPU upgrades because, of course, it kind of repackaged the S6 chip last year. So I'm anticipating a body temperature sensor as well as blood pressure.
That was almost exactly right. With body temperature sensing, not checking. There's like a difference there. But not blood pressure monitoring. That didn't happen.
That seems to be doable in other smartwatches and something Apple's clearly been working on through patents, and it's only a matter of time before Apple adopts it with the Series 8. But as far as overall design, I do think the Series 8 will basically look the same as the Series 7.
Yes.
Again, the only big design change you'll notice is with that rugged version, which might be using different materials than aluminum and steel and titanium, but I do think
it did use titanium, so it's kind of wrong there. But this was bold. I remember, no one was claiming the Series 8 was going to look the same as the Series 7 at this point. And I was like, nah, Apple just redesigned the watch. I don't think they're going to redesign it 2 years in a row. I think the iPhone Mini coming back will be very successful, like the return of original Coke after Coca-Cola tried to change the formula. The difference is the original Coca-Cola was selling pretty well. The mini iPhone relatively was not selling that great compared to all the other iPhones. I'm just convinced that Apple keeps trying to do this 4 iPhone lineup, and they just can't figure out a formula where all 4 sell well. It's like you can typically get 2 to 3 to sell really well, but once you add in a 4th, that one always sells a lot worse. Like, there's not a healthy way to do 4 iPhones. Like, the mini iPhone didn't sell bad. Like, if you compare it to other Android phones, it just sold a lot worse than the iPhone 12 and 13 and the 12 Pro and 13 Pro. Like, the Pros and Pro Maxes have always had pretty strong sales, but they thought if they did a Plus, that one might sell better than the Mini, and it would sell for more, so that would be more profitable. But what ended up happening, which I don't think Apple is that upset about, the supply chain is the problem here, but what I think ended up happening with the 14 line is everybody is just going for the Pros because the regular 14s are so boring and pretty expensive. They're not that cheap, and they're not that great. So that just pushes everybody to go for the Pro. If introducing a iPhone 16 mini results in less people going for the Pro, then it might not be worth investing in. Because, okay, the mini iPhone is selling better. Yeah, but we're making less money on each phone. And ultimately, I think Apple wants us all to buy the Pro. They're not going to complain. If sales for the 14 Plus are weak, but sales for the 14 Pro and Pro Max are doing great, then I think Apple is still going to consider this a win. Look at the face Drew's making. He's so annoyed.
Currently kind of ugly, but people will be okay with that because it's so durable. As far as AirPods go, we just got AirPods 3, so I don't think we're going to get an update to that anytime soon. But AirPods Pro haven't been updated since 2019, which means we're going to come up on a 3-year mark later this year.
The best.
And there actually have been quite a bit of rumors about AirPods Pro coming out in the fourth quarter, which could possibly be rocking lossless audio playback, better battery life, and thanks to Mac rumors, an external speaker on the charge case so you can ping it and
that leak was really early.
Which I think is pretty cool because
this leaked at like the end of 2021, even though the product didn't ship until, what was it, Q3 or Q4 of this year. But AirPods Pro 2 were definitely like the best, in my opinion, the best Apple product of the year.
I'm thinking about upgrading my AirPods at some point, and I'm really hoping they prioritize battery life here, because my most frustrating thing with buying all these AirPods over the years is those little batteries are tiny, so they get so many cycles on them and they degrade so quickly that you have to upgrade them every so often. You can't really hold on to them as long as you hold on to a phone or an iPad or a Mac. So if they had really good battery life, you could probably extend the lifespan of those AirPods quite a bit. Better. And that's possibly why I would really like it if Apple fixed all of my issues with AirPods Max. Get it USBC in a decent case. But unfortunately, there's no rumors or reports about AirPods Max getting any kind of update this year, which bums me out. I do have to say I kind of believe it. I feel like if there was something in the works for AirPods Max, they probably would have come up in the news, or leakers would be talking about them around now. But also no rumors or leaks about updated HomePods either. So no update to the HomePod Mini or the original HomePod, which is a shame because I think that there's room in the lineup for something bigger and better than the HomePod Mini. It's just, as we've seen in the smart speaker market, if you do something higher end than $99, then it better have a display of some kind, right? It better be like a hub with a screen that can play videos and you can do video calls off of it, or look at security cameras around the house. So a home hub Apple could make that has like, an iPad-like screen on it, but it's connected to a HomePod that's running a modified version of tvOS.
There's been chit-chat about that, but really nothing very concrete. Nothing very serious. I've seen people say Apple is prototyping a HomePod with a display on it. It looks like the old iMac G4 thing. But yeah, no updates on AirPods Max, which is definitely a shame. Tommy says no headset announcement next year. All I want to ask to the people that say they're expecting a headset to launch this year is, why do you think this year is accurate when for the past 3 years these exact same rumors from the exact same sources have all been saying it'll drop in 2020, and then they changed it to it'll drop in 2021, and then they changed it to it'll drop in 2022. Now they're saying it'll drop in 2023. Every time we get close, they claim, oh, Apple pushed it back. Why do you think this year is different, is my question. Like, you're like, well, it's like Auntie the Boy Who Cried Wolf. Like, well, eventually it has to happen, and I guess it should be this year because they wouldn't delay those reports a 4th year in a row, right? Fool me thrice, fool me 4 times, fool me 5 times. You might be right. I might not be fooled on the 5th time because you might end up being right. But no, I just... they literally asked Jaws in the Wall Street Journal interview when they said, fill this sentence... answer the blank for this sentence. The metaverse is, in Jaws, Apple's head of marketing said, a word I will never use. So if that's not proof enough to you that Apple doesn't care about Meta's new headset, or Apple doesn't care about PlayStation VR, Apple boasted about VR features on the Mac back in 2017, and then they dropped them. They got rid of them because not that many people were using it. And there was a time where everybody was boasting about like smartphones putting into headsets and using your smartphone as a form of a cheap VR thing. Samsung was doing it, Google was doing it, and not that many people did it. And Apple never even expressed mild interest in it. I just don't see it happening. Keep in mind when you guys are talking about, Apple's rumored to launch a headset. The same people that are claiming Apple's launching a headset said that it would cost $3,000. So if you're going by what the rumors are saying, Does it sound like Apple to drop a $3,000 VR headset so that you can play Angry Birds AR? Like, I don't know. It just doesn't sound like something Apple would do to me. I could be wrong, but I doubt it personally.
That I could see selling for $200, $300 and probably finding a decent market. But the rumors on that product have gone fairly quiet. So I'm not sure if I should
Still
predict
pretty
that
quiet.
is actually going to happen. Just to be safe, I'm going to say no HomePods this year, no AirPods Max refresh of any kind. Maybe
Wow,
if we're lucky,
correct.
a price reduction if they have a surplus of these things. But overall, I wouldn't expect too much in the AirPods department apart from AirPods Pro, which should hopefully be like the best value for active noise canceling headphones within Apple's lineup. Are there other things you guys are predicting for 2022
is that it?
other than this AR headset everyone can't shut up about? Still personally,
Oh my god, how perfect. That literally couldn't have come up in a better time. Literally, we were just talking about it. Okay, I gotta hear this.
have a hard time understanding how Apple, who doesn't care much about VR in the past few years, is suddenly going to change their market into releasing like a $3,000 headset that's mostly good for living room demos, and you're not going to be able to wear it, you know, fashionably in public because it's not glasses. It's a full-on headset that's going to need a 96-watt power adapter and an M1 or M2 chip inside. It sounds interesting, but I really have a hard time seeing how Apple could release that and pitch it within their market when they clearly care so little about VR and AR can only do so much when it's such a big, bulky headset that you're not going to be able to wear with you around in public. AR glasses, I see a lot of potential there, but the headset, I don't really know where the market can go for that. So I'm going to predict all of these rumors on the headset end up being bust, and we don't see an AR product from Apple in 2022. But what do you guys think? Feel free to tell me what you think is
So
wrong.
just as a reminder to all of you, in January,
How long was I, future Drew? And how's the Tesla? I hope you're enjoying it. This is your option, Drew.
it's great. I'm loving the Tesla. Thanks for asking, old Drew. And you got a lot of things wrong, some things right, but I don't know. What would you say the percentages that there were? I think Drew got about 30% right, maybe 70% wrong, maybe 35.
I'll see you
But
all in the next one.
these are not leaks. You know, I don't have sources telling me anything. But just as a reminder for all of you there, that was back in January of 2022. Ming-Chi Kuo was claiming that Apple was going to drop a VR/AR headset at the end of 2022. Now that exact same source that used to say it was dropping early 2023 has now pushed it back and is saying it's coming end of 2023. So that's why I don't believe it. And based on the web traffic it generates, from what I can see, I don't think there's that much public interest in it. I know that Meta likes to think that people want headsets, but it's pretty niche. It's really only good for a handful of games, and it's very expensive. Like the Meta Quest Pro is the one people are talking about, and it's like $1,500. And I'm sure PS VR2 is probably going to be cheaper, but again, I think it'll be one of those things that's really cool for like the first couple weeks, and then you go back to playing games normally. I don't think it's gonna become like the new norm or anything. And Apple is just so less into the AAA gaming business than PlayStation is. Like, there's a lot of overlap between VR gaming and PlayStation gaming. 550 is better, but still not that cheap. Um, and Apple's not going to make it as cheap as PlayStation is, that's for sure. And I mean, that's basically the price of the console. It's like buying two consoles. Or most people aren't paying $500 for their PlayStations, right? Because they didn't have that many in stock. Everyone was having to pay double for them or whatever. The AR demos from a few years ago seemed so cool, but they never had fun with an iPad. Made sense why they went quiet on it. I just either the story is completely made up or it's got to be an internal development tool, especially when the latest reports on that headset are it's going to be running XROS. That's the name, which X for mixed and then R for reality. So XROS. Is that really something Apple would market? You're going to have Mac OS, Watch OS, TV OS, and XROS with your $3,000 headset. I just have a really hard time believing they're going to do that. Many people aren't going for the Meta Quest 2. The Quest 2 is usually what people opt for. Yeah, but like, this is not selling at the same volume as iPads or AirPods or iPhones. This is a very specific market that's actually buying these things. and I don't think the amount of time spent on them is anywhere near as high as traditional gaming. Like most gaming is still going to be played on either mobile devices or with controllers or with keyboard and mice. Um, Extended reality, yeah. The PlayStation VR 2 costs more than the PlayStation 5 itself. That I think will affect the take rate of it. Um, your prediction for the 10th gen iPad was way better than what we got. Yeah, probably would have been better off if they just kept the iPad 9 at the same price, same design. It just got a new chip. Just give it the A14 chip. Give it slightly better camera. And it doesn't have Apple Pencil 2 support, so they could have moved the camera over on the iPad 9. Maybe that would have looked a little weird, but um, phones have become more of a utility. VR mainly for entertainment, but it's very specific entertainment. They're very different markets, and by different I mean one is big, one is small. One is used by a lot, one is used by very few, relatively speaking. I'm sure there's a few million people with VR headsets, but they're not using their headsets more than they're using their TVs, more than they're using their uh, desktop displays or laptop displays or phone display. It's a cool little niche, but I don't see Apple's need to enter it. If they were to ship it, they would probably use something like VROS or AROS, not XRS. I agree with you 100%. Well, thank you. Yeah, it's been delayed so many times. The fact that we watched this predictions video and so much of it was wrong, right? Like we didn't know about the Mac Studio. We didn't know about the studio display. We didn't know about the dynamic island. So many things were wrong, but the one thing that has stayed true to all these predictions over the years in these videos is yeah, the mixed reality headset just doesn't happen, despite everyone in the leak community claiming it's around the corner. It's been 6 months away for 4 years, essentially. Everyone's constantly like, well, it's coming, they're working on it, but I don't know. I just don't see like a big market that Apple's missing out on. And I don't think there's much overlap. I think there is a lot of overlap for I don't know what Meta's doing. I think Meta's a big joke who's wasting all their time and money. You should have just stayed with Facebook. You should have just kept doing Facebook. Leave Instagram, leave WhatsApp alone. Just try to make Facebook better. You don't need to turn everything into this weird metaverse type thing. But there's a lot of overlap between like people who buy PlayStations and people who want to play VR games. I can understand that. There's like a gaming sector and people that want to experience games in different ways than just the controller. Okay, I can understand that. Same thing in like the PC gaming realm. There's a lot of overlap between people who play PC games and people who might want to try out VR games. I see that overlap. With Apple, I don't see much overlap at all. Like Mac users for years have never been that big into gaming. Just the number of people that are willing to spend money on games that use a Mac is very low. I know that it's not zero. I know that you exist and you're out there, but just technically speaking, it's not very many people. And iPhone users that game are more likely not interested in VR stuff because the whole reason they're playing games on their phone and not a dedicated, not a Nintendo Switch, not an Xbox, is because they're more passive about it. They want to play a game in portrait mode with one finger. They want their Wordles, they want their Candy Crush, they want their, light passive gaming that you can occasionally do on the go. It's not something that they want to pack around a big headset everywhere they go. That's not going to work. If it's covering your vision and this requires a strap, then that means it is not a wearable that you take with you. It's not like a watch. It's not like headphones that you just wear all the time or wear all day. It's a living room toy. Maybe they push it as a feature for a better way to experience Apple Arcade. There's arcade games that are really cool with VR, but our Apple Arcade is not doing all that well. The take rate for it is not very high. And maybe you could argue that it's helpful for Apple Fitness Plus to pretend you're in the gym and you're in this virtual gym. I don't know. But Apple Fitness Plus doesn't have a super high take rate either. They're not doing that great. So, no, I don't see it. Don't you say the same thing about Airtags? I don't think so, but they were rumored for a long time, and I don't think I was that against it. I mean, I wouldn't be shocked if you could find an old live stream or an old video where I say that I don't know why Apple feels the need to enter the geo tracking device market, but I recall last year saying AirTags was one of the best products of the year just because Apple has the Find by network, and they've been pushing the Find by network for a while. That I was like, yeah, if Apple has such a large number of devices that are connected and are able to track each other in a encrypted manner, because way before AirTags came out, they had come up with this way for other Apple devices to ping other Apple devices so that you could track lost items. And there was this talk for years. I remember, yeah, like you said, AirTags were rumored for like 2 years, not four, but like 2 years before they actually launched. It was about a 24 months in between the first leak and the actual announcement. Mixed reality headsets been around for much longer than that. You weren't that against it, but you did think they were scrapped. I think I remember talking about how the antitrust was becoming a big issue because Tile had joined the antitrust case against Apple becoming a monopoly. And it was like, Apple does not compete with Tile at all. And yet, they're filing the antitrust case. And then before AirTags launched, Apple dropped they opened the Find My network to third parties. So other companies like Chipolo or whatever could make geo-tracking devices that supported the Find My app. So that's a lot cheaper, that's a lot more digestible, and that's a much bigger market in my opinion. Like, I thought the AirTags were going to be more expensive. I thought they were going to be like, they wouldn't let you buy one at a time, like you have to buy three for $100 or something. And then they ended up actually selling them for $29, which was super cheap, but like a very cheap accessory to help you track down items like keys or a wallet, or some people put them on their pets, which I don't think Apple recommends, but that just sounds like something from the beginning, even before they launched it. Like, it sounded like a very simple, basic product category that Apple could get into that would easily integrate within their ecosystem. I don't see that in the same way with the mixed reality headset. Like, there's not a big overlap, in my opinion, between people that are interested in playing VR games and people that are using current Apple hardware. And maybe they want to get into it, but if Apple would be the company to do the Meta Quest Pro type pricing, not the PlayStation VR type pricing. I don't even think PlayStation really makes money off of their consoles. They make that off of the services and the royalties. Apple rarely turns out to be cheap, especially if it requires an M1 Pro chip. AR headset is like the rumors of Apple making a full TV with a screen. Well, not even that many people have been pushing for that. Not that many leakers are claiming that's going to happen. It'll be for productivity, multiple screens, and entertainment, video, in movies. It's just, you can't, like, only one person at a time, unless everybody's buying their own $1,500 headset. Productivity for multiple screens. So is it tracking your hands so that you can look at so you still have to have a physical keyboard and a physical mouse or a fake trackpad? It's just your desk. So instead of buying a iMac for, what do they cost now? $1,200. You'll buy a $1,500 headset that you'll put on and use a keyboard and a mouse at the same time. I'm sorry. I've heard this pitch so many times and it doesn't happen. I don't believe it. Yeah, the PlayStation VR does require a PS5, whereas the Quest 2/Quest Pro are standalone devices. And if you follow the leaks at all of the Apple AR VR headset, it is not rumored to require. Well, I mean, it might require an iPhone to set up or something, but it's not rumored that the iPhone would be doing the heavy lifting. It's rumored that it would be its own independent device where the silicon on board it would be closer to that of the Meta Quest Pro. It would not be that similar to the PlayStation. Dawson says, I have an Oculus Quest 2 and I love it, but I definitely don't use it more than my phone or TV. Also, the metaverse is boring. Yeah, I agree. Everyone I've talked to with a headset feels very similarly. I haven't seen a Tile sponsor a commercial since. Rest in peace. Yeah, but I feel like Apple could easily make that space, the geo tracking device space. There's so much benefit that Apple can bring because they already have billions of devices across the world that are connected. So Tile was trying to do something similar where, to track down your keys, if your keys are out of range, then they will ping another Tile device, but that's all dependent on a lot of people owning Tile devices. So if your product is very popular, then you get a somewhat reliable network, but Apple has a way more popular product than Tile does. So they knew by making the AirTag that they would have a much more reliable, much more effective product at tracking down items. So I'm like, yeah, Apple could easily enter that space and it would work out. I don't feel the same way about the mixed reality headset. I'm like, you're going to be the success of that product is going to be dictated on the price of it and how many titles or apps you can get to support it, which Apple can't even get AAA games, that many AAA games on Mac in the first place. Nation super chatted, thank you. He says Sony did say they made profit off PS5. Unusual for a console though. It's usually the razor and blades technique. Microsoft loses $100+ on their Xbox. That's what I've heard is most. I don't know how much the profit is, but I'm guessing that's not the majority of their revenues. PlayStation profit. They make all their money off of Xbox Game Pass, and it used to be called Xbox Live or Xbox Gold or something. I don't keep up with that stuff. I don't know what they've changed the names of and whatever. I've used my Oculus Quest to do 3D modeling for work. Okay, there's some use there, but I just don't think it deserves designated hardware for that purpose alone. The metaverse sucks. VR chat doesn't. Yeah, but that doesn't mean Apple wants to make hardware so that you can use VR chat. Let's see. We've just been talking about it for so long and nothing's happened. That's why I have such a hard time believing it. Samsung released a tracker 2 before Apple since AirTags kept getting scrapped. Haven't heard anything about those. The Galaxy Smart Tag? Yeah, I don't know anybody that uses those, but I remember them getting announced. VR nerds are into games. Apple isn't really known for gaming. They need to fix that before they even consider goofy head contraptions. I'm just trying to visualize a situation where you're like, rather than buy dedicate, because that's another problem is battery life. It's another device you have to charge. If your argument is it's not for gaming, let's tackle that concept for a second. If the headset is not for gaming, it's for productivity, then you're trying to say like you can use 3 or 4 or 60 different monitors in the virtual world. Then okay, you buy a keyboard, you buy a mouse, and this whole thing is being powered by the M1 Pro chip on something that has to sit on your face. That objectively is going to have a much worse battery life than a MacBook Pro, and probably not be much cheaper. Unless you're suggesting that they're going to require a Mac Studio that you have to plug in a Thunderbolt port to the headset. The Mac Studio is powering it. Now you have a cable going up to your face. Does this sound like Apple to you? Does this sound like the type of thing Apple would expect people to do? Like, I don't know. Either it's completely self-powered, in which case the battery life is going to be much worse, even though it's a desktop. Desktops aren't supposed to have battery lives. And the resolution and the display that you can get on a headset is not going to outperform a mini LED 120 hertz display that you can get on a MacBook. People said the same things about the iPhone. No, they didn't. I'm sorry. No one said these same things about the iPhone, Joey. They really didn't. Apple was big on iPods, and switching from making pocketable music players to pocketable cell phones was not that big a stretch. There was already iTunes phone at the time, and cell phones were pretty popular already. Even smartphones were getting pretty popular before Apple entered the space. The iPhone was not, it pioneered what a smartphone could be, but it was by no means the first smartphone. Where it's like comparing the Oculus or Meta Quest to smartphones pre-iPhone, I don't think is a fair comparison in terms of sales, in terms of how many people were buying them, how many people were using them. Not at all. There was way more people buying those phones before compared to the number of people buying headsets. Majority of people don't want to wear something on their head like that for any reason, even worse if you need to use your other devices. Yeah, like I think even Elon made a comment about that on a podcast. He was like, I just don't think the future is strapping TVs to your face. And I think I agree with that. I don't think that the future is going to be everybody wearing a headset. Like, I could see a market for glasses that's not a strap, that's not something that's this big bulky thing. I could see a market because the glasses concept would be more like a watch or more like AirPods, where you can wear it passively all day and it has some use cases, notifications, 3D holograms projected on top of your vision. But the fact that we've had so little development since the HoloLens, like the first HoloLens, is honestly not that much smaller or more compact than what the MetaQuest Pro can offer, and the MetaQuest Pro is still very expensive, not that capable, not something you can wear passively, opposed to a device that you can wear but only in your bedroom, only in your living room. As soon as you do any kind of walking, you have to take it off. Um, or it's not fashionable, of course. I just, when it gets delayed this many times, I don't believe it. This has been around longer than AirTags, just so we're clear. This is we thought AirTags were scrapped because they'd been rumored for so long and they hadn't launched. This has been out like pre AirTag and it's still not out. Um, I'm just worried that the glasses approach is so technically challenging that it's not that close. Like maybe back in 2017, 2016, I thought, oh, they'll have that hardware figured out in a couple of years. Apple wants to wait to do a headset until they can get glasses right. But the the HoloLens to the MetaQuest Pro is like 5 years of hardware development, and we're still not really to the point of it being a passive feature. So I'm convinced that the vision Apple wants, I'm sure they're working on it. I don't doubt that. And that's why the excuse I've had for this report for so many years is that Apple's probably working on mixed reality headsets for employees to prototype software development for the headset. But Tim Cook, I think, ultimately is wanting just a pair of glasses that you can wear that happen to project things. Um, and it doesn't look like a big bulky thing. But I bet after all of these years of development, they're probably slowly figuring out like that's really challenging to do. Glasses have to be very lightweight, they have to be very durable, and they have to have incredibly rich and vibrant visuals for it to be convincing. You know, Snapchat spectacles, not the ones that are just cameras, but there are new spectacles that have AR projection stuff. And they're still very limited in how the visuals look. It's not that immersive, it's not that convincing. Um, After all these years of development, they're probably realizing that may not be that close. It may be the type of technology similar to how Apple thought AirPower was going to be very easy to do. Oh yeah, well, let's just put a bunch of coils together, and that way you can drop your phone wherever you need to, and it'll still charge. Whereas in reality, it's like actually that's not that easy. That it turns out being a lot more complicated than we thought, and they end up just not going in that direction at all. Um, you think the smart glasses will be the last new product Tim Cook announces before retiring? I don't think they're ready, and I don't think they're going to be ready soon at this point. I don't think the development is going to suddenly pick up and they're suddenly going to crack this AR contact lenses type code. I don't think they're that close anymore. I used to, but seeing this many years of headsets kind of remain the same big, bulky thing makes me think it's not that we're not getting that close. So I know Tim Cook has said he wants to do one last big product before retiring. Um, I think there's either the headset or what's the other possibilities? The car. I really want them to do the car, but I'm worried it's gonna take forever, and they don't have a good solid vision. They don't have one person in charge of the car saying this is what we're gonna do. They keep changing their mind. Oh, it's a robotaxi. Yeah, it's not a robotaxi. Ah, it's just the CarPlay. Ah, it's actually hardware. Do we want to manufacture them? Do we want to partner with someone else? Like they just can't keep their story straight. Um, Needs to be something you can do on an Apple Watch chip. Yeah, I think I would agree with that. It's like you gotta get a very power efficient, very small chip, and as soon as you're designing something that sits on your face, the battery life just takes a massive hit. Like Google Glass had a terrible battery life, and those were pretty bulky. Those were not very fashionable. Apple's gonna want something fashionable and with good battery life. Ugh. Yeah, I don't know. It's weird how it seems like Apple keeps wanting to push Mac gaming like every 3 years, but they never really keep up with it. No, they don't try that hard, and I just don't think the audience is there. Like the new 14-inch and 16-inch MacBook Pros, there was not any discussion of gaming when they unveiled those. There was talk of game development, but never once did they mention it's very good at playing games. They just said it's good for 3D modeling, video editing, and all that stuff. Um, Kevin's in charge of it now, but that could change tomorrow. Like there's been 5 different people in charge of the Apple car, and they keep shifting. They keep going. Oh, okay, no, they're in charge. Oh, they left. We lost them to someone else. Okay, let's try this. And they just need to stick with a plan. Um, agree with all of this. What are they doing? Sorry, we're talking about because we reacted to my 2022 predictions video, and we ended the video by saying I don't think Apple's going to release a mixed reality headset because in January of 2022, Ming-Chi Kuo said that Apple's going to launch a mixed reality headset at the end of this year, and it didn't happen. Now, Ming-Chi Kuo is saying it's going to happen at the end of next year, and before this, he said it was going to happen in 2020. Yeah, ask gamers if they think Resident Evil makes it a gaming device. People did because Google thought they would never do it because the margins on the phone business were so small on the fact that they would work with the carriers, which they wouldn't want to. It's not really the same. We're not talking about like carriers and margins being small. We're just talking about the market itself being small. It's not. It's very different argument against the iPhone. Jasmine says, I feel like we've reached the peak of what we need as humans, though. A phone is our ultimate tool. What more do you need? There's no benefit to strapping a computer to your head like a helmet. I would argue there's very little. I don't know if we can say we've reached the peak of what we need. You could argue we reached that a long time ago. Phones aren't necessarily like a biological need, but they are useful and they are marketable and they are practical. And I don't think people appreciate how useful phones are. And everyone's constantly trying to leapfrog the phone. They keep like, what's going to be the next big product? Like phones took off and phones are really successful and really popular. What's going to be the next big thing? That's what everyone's asking. And I don't think there is going to really be anything as big or as influential, at least in our lifetime. Elon thinks it's like Neuralink, like the future is going to be implanting computer chips into our brain, and that will alleviate the need for a smartphone. I don't think that's true. I don't think that's going to happen, at least for a very, very long time. You know, Elon thinks it's 5 years away. Um, some think it's 10 to 30 years away. I think it could be like, 60, 80 years away. When you're predicting things that far out, you can't be very accurate at all. Obviously, I made predictions in this video from January to now, and I was wrong about a lot of it. Yeah, gamers want to build their own custom PCs anyway. I just don't think the experience of these headsets is that better or that much more immersive because at least when I've tried them, it still just feels like you're wearing a headset. Like I don't feel like I'm transported to another world. I know I'm not actually there. They don't cover your peripheral vision, so it feels like you're wearing swimming goggles because you can't see anything outside of like where my fingers are. And if you try to fix that, then the headset gets even bigger, even heavier, even more expensive, and it's pulling down on your hair, and you got to put it around your ears, and you can't like objects don't stop your hand from moving. You can't run around too far because then you're going to run into something in the real world. So to me, like it's just not that immersive of an experience. To me, headsets are mostly about replacing your mouse or joystick with a gyroscope that's controlled by your neck. And that can make certain parts of the experience a bit more immersive, but not entirely. I actually think we underestimate how immersive a game can be without headsets. Like when you reprogram your hands to be like, okay, with a controller, with a keyboard and mouse, like this moves around my character. This is how my character jumps. This is how my character interacts with something. It presses this button to swing or to, hit something or to, climb a ladder, whatever. When you get really, really immersed in that game, even though you're not wearing a headset, even though you're just looking at a display, you feel this like natural, like I am connected to this player, like I am the player. And like that's why people like when they take a bunch of damage in a game or something, they'll be like, ow, like they're not physically in pain, but they're immersed in it. They're invested in it. and you can get really invested and really immersed in a very good game that doesn't require a headset at all. Um, and I just think the headset is one other approach, but it, in my opinion, limits a lot of what the gameplay can be more so than it enhances it. And that's why it won't replace it. If it was just better in every way, I think we would have caught on. It would have caught on to a lot larger demographic by now. But it still kind of remained as a couple games here and there, kind of cool with it. But everybody still goes back to the regular stuff. It's not being used more than TVs, phones, and that kind of thing. Um, let's see. Steve Jobs was asked about this at D3 in 2005, and his exact words were, "We would have to go and work with the five orifices." He was talking about the carriers. Yeah, I understand that they denied it, but I don't. Your claim earlier, Joey, was people said the same thing about the iPhone. None of the things you've listed are the same thing about the headset. I haven't said that Apple wouldn't do it because they'd have to work with the carriers or that the margins wouldn't be good. I'm just saying that the market isn't there. There was a huge market for cell phones and smartphones. There's not a huge market for the headset. It's a lot smaller than every other market that Apple's in, basically. Geo tracking devices are a lot cheaper, a lot easier to market. Smartphones are huge, tablets are huge. I would argue the camera business is arguably bigger. Um, let's see. Apple glasses get announced but not shipped. Tim retires, then Apple Glass becomes the next AirPower. Boom! I can retire. Just like that. Doesn't AR require some kind of camera in order to merge the virtual aspect with the real world? People don't want to deal with other people walking around with active cameras on their heads. No, that's the problem. Is like a headset is never going to be that. It's never going to be a fashion piece. It's always got to be a living room toy. Um, most gamers build their quite a bit do. Yes, our parents thought we'd have flying cars by now, and we can't even get unified EV charging. That's true. Yeah, there's a lot of things we thought we'd get. I don't think we're at the peak of what humans need necessarily, but need is a weird word, especially when talking about technology. I just don't think that the headset is the next big thing. Let's see. What's more realistic in your eyes, the Apple AR VR headset or an Apple electric vehicle? My guess is if Apple could get the hardware right and do everything the way they want to, I predict that if you could develop Apple glasses, that would fit in better with Apple's ecosystem more so than the car would. The car is just so different. It's such a very drastic difference to the business that Apple's in. They're into consumer electronics, most of which that you can fit in a bag, fit in your pocket. You know, AirPods is a huge piece of their business. The Apple Watch, you know, you walk into a store, you buy their product in a box. Yeah, they sell computers and electronics, but cars is just such a drastically different market. You know, you have, tire maintenance and charging networks and self-driving technology and safety features and regulations on mirrors and aerodynamics and efficiency. It doesn't really go hand in hand. Like some people just say, well, the iPhone's really popular, so I'm sure the Apple car would be very popular. And it's like, I don't think there's that much overlap in like, I am an Apple sheep, therefore I will buy an Apple car. I think it's very cheap and not very cheap, but it's relatively cheap to engross yourself in the Apple ecosystem compared to buying an Apple car, which the rumors now are claiming they're targeting under $100,000. Great, that's promising. It's like, okay, it'll be cheaper than 100 grand. I don't think that means everybody who buys an iPhone is going to want an Apple car. Um, so my guess is that AR glasses and AR headset are more in line. They're closer to the ecosystem, but not that close. Honestly, I feel like a dedicated camera would be closer. Um, let's see. I don't think stereoscopic 3D vision is that important. 3D vision is mostly perspective and focal length rather than stereoscopic. I think I understand what you're saying. Chris says, I think the next big thing in tech that is becoming more eco-friendly, for example, it can gain some of its power from natural sources like the sun or plants. Well, there's like interesting tech development, but I think most people are talking about like products in the consumer world, like what companies should be investing in that's gonna be a very popular device or product or service that lots of people are gonna want to sign up for. Um, you kept saying that what a smart microwave would do last stream. Remember Spy Kids, where you'd ask it to make anything and it'd pop out? That's what we need. Yeah, if you can make a microwave that can do like the Spy Kids thing, that would be impressive. But that's not what these things are. The smart microwaves I've seen are just like a regular microwave that has Bluetooth for some reason in an app. I don't know what it does. You're gonna talk to Alexa rather than just punch in a number. I don't even know how that could be faster or easier. Sorry, I didn't get that. Nothing is playing right now. Food 3D printing is kind of a thing, just needs more years of development. Someone brought up a good point recently. I can't remember who it was, but I was watching a podcast where people were talking about future manufacturing or development, and someone had mentioned that 3D printing just always fails to scale. I'm not talking about the 3D printers themselves, but anything you want to do at scale, that the concept of having, an X, Y, and Z axis style printer that prints anything, whether it's plastic, whether it's metal, whether it's food, it never scales. Like you can never get it to mass produce at a fast enough volume for it to be profitable. There's lots of businesses that have tried to get into we're going to mass produce something with 3D printing, and it never, like I've seen startups that want to do 3D printed houses. I've seen startups that want to do 3D printed rockets, 3D printed parts. And food is definitely something you need a lot of scale for to sell profitably. You got to sell tons of the things. And I wonder how much volume, how much scale you can get with food 3D printing. But Tim Cook has teased the AR stuff. I don't think he would make so many comments about AR if they weren't going to release something. I don't doubt that he wants to. I'm just telling you that the hardware isn't up to their standards. I don't think Apple is the type of company to release a mixed reality headset because the use case for it is going to be so narrow and the price is going to be so high. Or if they do, it's going to be like AirPods Max. It's going to be like, except worse, like more expensive than AirPods Max and less useful than AirPods Max. Like, okay, they tried it, or a better example might be the original HomePod. People that are in that realm are kind of impressed with it. You're like, the hardware is very impressive of the Apple mixed reality headset. I don't doubt that. It would probably be the best headset. I just don't think it would sell very well, and they probably wouldn't get that much return on investment. And they would just have that one version, and then it wouldn't really go anywhere, and they wouldn't release another one. My guess is Tim Cook wants something like Apple Glass, where you can wear it passively, you can wear it all day, and it's very lightweight. It's not a strap. It's not bulky. It's just a very fashionable wearable that can support prescription lenses, and you can wear it all day. And that's what Tim wants to do, and that's what he said he's very excited for. And I'm guessing that's what he is targeting. But my guess is just that the development of that hardware is proving to be a lot more complicated than they thought, and they're not going to be able to make something that they're proud of that they actually want to ship. We have unified EV charging in Europe because they have a standard charge port that even Tesla uses. Yeah, because the government agreed on a standard, which the US government won't agree on a standard. But that doesn't mean that the EU picked the right port necessarily. They just picked the right port very, very early on. So transitioning to that port was the port that EU uses, we don't even have in the US. Um, there's it's a broken network. That's the big problem. Is there's a lot of EVs in the U.S. and they're all using one. Not all of them, but the vast majority of them, and all the fast charging stations, the vast majority of them are using the North America charging standard. So it would be the easiest transition to consumers to have all of the automakers switch to the North America charging system. If you tried to switch everybody to CCS, then it would punish and annoy and frustrate the vast majority of consumers, and it would take way longer and cost way more. So there's a very obvious charge port that the US should pick, but they won't pick one, which definitely sucks. 3D printing is good for rare custom parts, but not mass market stuff. 3D printed houses are in the market now, just not popular in first world countries. I know they're in the market. I'm just saying there's not that many of them. They can't scale. It's slow and it's not super profitable. But I've seen 3D printed houses. I'm just saying they're not like replace it. They're not gonna replace regular construction houses. And even in the third world countries, they can't build that many of them that quickly. It's mostly like philanthropy. It's like charity work. It's not profitable. I work in the denture business, and we have multiple large 3D resin printers that print dentures. See, I assume that's also something that has to be good at, like, it's good for something precise, but probably not at massive volume. Not something you want to use if you want to make something quickly. A Siri microwave wouldn't work because the food would go moldy before Siri would get the right command. Do you have issues with the Bluetooth on your Series 7 dropping out if you're connected to buds or a speaker? No, I haven't, but I'm sorry to hear that, Sir Gigalot. He said that in the not too distant future we would see something to do. Yeah, and he also thought AirPower would be ready in 2018. That didn't happen either. It's possible that Tim Cook thinks something is around the corner, and then it ends up not being around the corner. But when did he say that? Didn't he say that in like 2020? It's gonna be like 3 years ago he claimed that. So how soon is soon to you? Do you think that the EU will now mandate a protocol for USB-C, or will it be up to Apple, Samsung, Google? I don't think there's much talk about a protocol, and I don't necessarily think there needs to be. You don't need Thunderbolt on every USB-C port. Um, I think some USB-C ports it makes for them to not be like very fast data transfer. Like I've seen some people say that their electric shavers use USB-C. That port is never ever in its life going to transmit data. Why would you require that port to be USB 3.0 if all it's going to do is charge something? Um, it reduces labor costs substantially, but I don't know. I haven't looked into it that closely. I just know that every startup video I've seen, every startup company I've seen that goes into 3D houses says that they don't make that many of them. Um, he said that in like August of last year. So, okay, it's been over a year, and he said that in the not too distant future. So to him, what does that actually mean? Um, I feel like you're usually 3D printing houses in regions where it's very the culture can't afford to build. So you're trying to come up with really really low cost, but typically when you do really really low cost, it doesn't scale all that quickly. Um, what are you hoping for next year? I think USB-C iPhone would be the biggest win just because we've been asking for that for so long and it actually feels like it might happen. I mean, it's not like my dream scenario. Dream scenario, Apple enters the EV space and they make a dedicated camera. They fix AirPods Max. They release a reasonably priced high refresh rate Pro Display this year, not last year. I don't remember that interview. Um, but August of this year. I I don't think Tim will ever get very specific, but to him, like I need to go back and find the quote. Um, but saying we would see something to do with AR could be just a lidar demo, like that. Something to do with AR doesn't necessarily mean we are releasing a mixed reality headset. My guess is it's just the hardware and the price of it is not in line with what they want. Um, it's I believe he said it. I'm just saying that doesn't confirm they're releasing a mixed reality headset, or if they do, that it will be very good. Um, he gave the most vague answer he could possibly give, but I've recalled Tim saying that they have aspirations in AR and they think AR is very exciting for years. You have to have a much higher pixel per inch when a screen is that close to your eye. Yes, and it's not that useful. It's not that many use cases where it takes off. I would love if they did a HomePod with a USB-C removable cable that could double as audio in. That would be interesting. Yeah, someone mentioned earlier, but they'd really like if you could connect HomePods to your computer and use your HomePods as like a form of stereo for your iMac or your Mac Studio or something. Um, I would like to see that. It still sucks that you can't connect to them via Bluetooth or wire. It has to be AirPlay, which is like ugh. That would be fantastic. There's new AirTag firmware updates. We gotta check down all of the new AirTag firmware updates. But it's a shame because AirTags to me feel like a pretty compelling, like really smart product to make it easier to find things, which is great. And I think that will directly save a lot of people a lot of money and time if they know where their things are. But they're abused so much. At least maybe it's a very small percentage of AirTags that are being used maliciously, but whenever they are used maliciously, it shows up in court and it shows up in articles. Like all the news reports on it like crazy every time someone stalks someone with an AirTag. And it's a shame that they're used that way because it's like a it's like a weird um dilemma that you're stuck with of like we can make a product that will help a lot of people and probably save a lot of people tons of time and money to be able to track down their items. And I think you could make the argument that AirTags could help people find things way better that they wouldn't be able to find if they used a different device. Like if you just use Tile or you just use the Galaxy Smart Tag, I feel like there's a chance that you wouldn't be able to find your item with those networks because they're just so much smaller and less reliable. And yet there's still a lot of people that can have their privacy compromised or have people come after them because of this product's existence. So, do you release it? Do you not release it? Like, should it exist? Should it not exist? But at this point, it's also like too late. It's not like Apple can just say AirTags are so dangerous, we're just going to stop making them. I don't think they would do that. I guess you could issue a firmware update where all of them just stop working and they're all useless, but that's not good for e-waste either. It's like you've committed to it, so at this point, you gotta you gotta just firmware update the crap out of them and try to make it really hard. I think they should design a way that if you try to disconnect the microphone from the AirTag, or not the microphone, the speaker, then the whole device dies. I think there's a way right now for you to modify them to the point that the speaker won't start chirping, if it's attached to a car and it's tracking someone down or something. Right now, there's a way to disconnect the speaker and the AirTag still works. Maybe it could be worth re-engineering the AirTags so that they build the speaker so close to the where the battery powers the logic board or whatever to the point that like if you try to disconnect the speaker, the device just flat out will not work. Like it can detect when it's been modified or it just physically breaks the entire device, like a baked in version, so there's no way to hack it. That could help. Does the Thunderbolt port on the M1 Pro and M1 Max even have support for 6K or 5K displays at 120 hertz? No, I don't think so. They max out, I think, at 4K at 120 hertz or something like that. But yeah, 5K, 6K, 120 is very high. But there's talk that Apple will come up with their own. Apple has done things in the past where they can get more resolution or more frame rate out of a product or device by building in their own native throughput or protocol for their ports. So that's why like the studio display will display 6K on Macs, but if you connect the studio display to, or no, sorry, the Pro display is 6K. If you connect that to a PC, it can't run at 6K because it doesn't have Apple's custom handshake design that they bake into their hardware that the Pro display was designed to accept so that it can actually run at the full resolution. So there's talk that maybe they would have their own secret proprietary way to get the resolution and frame rate up that high. But yeah, you might need to buy new hardware to get the refresh rate that good. I might buy Mac Studio. Do I need external speakers? Yeah. I don't know what you're saying now. The Mac Studio has like a tiny speaker built into it, but it's not going to sound very good. Um, Keep in mind, not everybody gets the Studio display with the Mac Studio. I just bought a HomePod Mini. My only criticism is that it isn't portable, but otherwise it's a fantastic product. HomePod Go, home HomePod trailer. Let's see. If Apple does make a high refresh rate large display, no current Macs will be able to drive it. They could if they kept it at 4K. So, um, or they do their own little proprietary thing. It's not likely that Apple would keep it to 4K. I'm just saying it could be another way for them to justify you getting a Mac Pro, for example. They could say, like, the Mac Pro has the ports that you need to run an external monitor at 6K at 120 hertz. But if you plug in this 6K 120 hertz monitor to a non Mac Pro, then it'll run at 4K at 120 hertz, or it'll run at 6K at 60 hertz They'll just give you the choice if you're using inferior. If it was me, I would definitely take 4K at 120 hertz. I'm not that big into high resolution. It's not that important to me that it be 6K. 4K is good enough. Um, Thunderbolt 5 is double the speed of Thunderbolt 4, so that would work. Yeah, but it wouldn't. It just means that you couldn't use your existing Macs. What am I hoping for in the next round of new software updates this year? Charge limiter. That's by far top request with all of this tech that we're charging so frequently. And optimized battery charging sucks. I check on the battery charging state of my watch on my phone, and they all just are terrible at figuring out charging routines. They think they're good at it, but they're not. I would be so much more in favor of just having a charge limiter so that we could lock all of our devices to stop charging at a certain amount until we tell it otherwise. On Macs, phones, watches, iPad, everything needs that. I want that to be a feature rolled out to the entire ecosystem. In terms of software, I still am going to argue that the iPad needs dual boot Mac OS. I think that would be the fastest way to justify the iPad Pro's existence. iOS, I would love the death of pop-ups still. I've been asking for that for years. They still won't do it. I don't think anything should be a pop-up on the screen. Like the low battery warnings or the enter your settings and passwords or any. It should just be a drop-down notification. The Face ID animation when you're unlocking something, that could just be a drop-down. It doesn't need to. It already is that on Dynamic Island, but I don't think that should be a software feature that's paywalled. Like you need to buy a new phone for Face ID to not show up right in the middle of the display. Nothing should ever just pop up right in the middle of the display so that you can't interact with anything. Apple should have named the Mac Studio the Pro, the new Mac Pro, the Mac Ultra. Missed opportunity. Too many names for products. Oh, that's a good point. The Mac Ultra. Yeah. I used to use the term enterprise because I thought that the cheese grater Mac Pro, the one from 2019, is just so niche. Like the number of people that need that Mac is so specific. Um, yeah, if you have a 14 Pro, there are barely any pop-ups. I'm not saying that my wish was that they would come up with a new phone and software lock all of the pop-ups, but um, I just think that should be a standard thing. I don't think you should have to have a dynamic island just for there to not be a pop-up. That's stupid. When will we be able to use our HDMI TV on a Mac at 4K at 120 hertz? I don't know about HDMI. Oh, because it's all 2.0. When? I don't know. Probably the next time they refresh the uh, M2 Pro, M2 Max chips. When they put those in the MacBook Pros, I assume they would be able to handle HDMI 2.1. But I thought they could have done that with the current chips, and they didn't. I guess some people said that the throughput of the ports that they have on the MacBook Pro was too limited that they couldn't handle HDMI 2.1. But my guess is Apple would just rather you use a Thunderbolt to HDMI cable rather than update the HDMI cable because that probably costs them more money. When you had a 14 Pro, could you truly notice a difference in the bezels, or was it all talk on Twitter about them being smaller? Of course, I lied to you guys all the time. No, of course not. I'm telling you guys what I think. I went to Target the other day. I was we were getting Christmas presents for people and stuff, and they had an iPhone. That's where I took the picture on Twitter with the iPad 10, and they had a Z Flip that was broken that I took a picture of. But they also had the iPhone 14 Pro and the 14 Plus next to each other. So I finally got to look at an iPhone 14 Plus, and it was as underwhelming as you can possibly imagine. But I used the 14 Pro again, and I was playing with the island, and I was messing around with the camera because they just had one out on display. I meant other creators. To me, it was noticeable, but I don't think everyday people would find it noticeable. I'm a nerd, and I notice little design tweaks like that. I'm a geek that pays attention to those little details. Like I can tell the difference from the back of a phone of if it's a 12 or a 13 based on the size of the camera bump, that kind of thing, or the arrangement of the cameras and stuff. I pay attention to those little details. So I use my 13 Pro Max a lot every day. And when I picked up the 14 Pro Max just a couple days ago, I was like, yep, I can tell it just feels a little bit more modern looking. It feels a little bit more futuristic because the bezels are just a tiny bit thinner. That's like the most noticeable thing to me about the 13 Pro Max now is that those side bezels just feel a little bit thicker. And it's not a reason to buy the whole phone over, but yes, I did pick up on it. Let's see. They should build in Apple TV software in the studio display. I don't understand why they didn't do that personally. They could easily software update it too. It has the A13 chip in it. You could just send a firmware update to the studio display that lets it run tvOS, and I guess you could just use your phone as the remote. You could have Apple Music Sing even because it's got the A13 chip in there, which can handle Apple Music Sing. Um, Maybe Apple doesn't want to optimize tvOS to run on a 5K panel for some reason. But yeah, I don't understand why not. Like if people don't like to use it as a feature, then just don't use it as a feature. Like you don't need it to do that. Just have it as an option for those who want to use it like a little mini TV. Because tvOS is very fluid and very responsive and it's nice and it's a free thing they could do to make the product more desirable. That's just another selling point or another reason to buy it. Do I have any problems with Ventura? It's been horribly buggy for me and several of my friends. I would revert to Monterey if it wasn't for Stage Manager. I don't see YouTubers talking about it. I have Ventura on 2 Macs right now, and I haven't had really any noticeable issues. So sorry, it's kind of hard for me to talk about if I'm not having it. I don't like Stage Manager though on the Mac. Um, if you charge with a smart plug hooked up to HomeKit or shortcuts, you can set up charge limiter for yourself. Yeah, I'm not doing that. I bought smart plugs and then they get discontinued and the company forgets to update the firmware. That's a lot of work. And I don't like it would all become useless if Apple added the charge limiter. Then I will have bought all of these accessories and stuff for no reason. Plus, I charge a lot of my devices through the USB-C ports on my MacBook. I'm not like my watch is connected to one charge outlet, my phone is connected to a different charge outlet, my MacBook is connected to this charge outlet. It's like no, they're all set. Like my MacBook is charging my MagSafe Duo, which sometimes charges my AirPods, which sometimes charges my watch, and sometimes charges my phone. So to try to get a shortcut where you synchronize all devices hit 80% at the same time and then disconnect, it just wouldn't work for me. I would have to buy, I would have to rearrange my whole charging system and get longer cables to reach the power outlet. It's not a problem worth fixing, but it's something that the software should have. Um, it's not a problem that's worth fixing for me, but the devices should still have it. I've not seen the Renee Ritchie video, no, but what's more helpful than asking if I've seen the video is just bringing up the point that you thought was good from that video. Or maybe you don't think they have any good points. But in my opinion, like it's a different discussion entirely whether or not governments should get involved in product design and mandate ports and stuff like that. But like we mentioned earlier in this live stream, there's a lot of perks to the EU being very strict with what is allowed and what isn't, or here's what the common port is. For instance, with electric vehicles, very early on, the EU is like, we can't have all EVs using their own connector. We need to have one connector so that people aren't stranded and so that EVs can go to any charge station and just plug in and it charges just like a gas car. The government prioritized making the transition to electric cars easy and simple to understand. So you can complain and say, oh, the EU is overstepping their boundaries, that's too much control. But the end result is consumers don't have to worry about adapters and which charge station you park at. No, you can just go to any of them with any EV and plug in and charge. That's a very nice perk of the EU putting their foot down, saying, here's the charge port. But we don't have that in the US. So that means Apple can go portless, or they can keep Lightning, or they can switch it to Type-C, or they can make some other proprietary connector that we haven't heard of yet. Because the US wants to let the company do whatever they want. But the end result is we have a lot of people that are confused, that are like, wait, is this the iPad charger or the iPhone charger? No, that's Type-C, that's Lightning, that they're both reversible, but this one is for your iPad, this one's for your MacBook, and now that means I gotta have multiple cables. It means more e-waste. It means that you could be at a friend's house and they have an Android phone and they're charging their phone. Hey, can I charge my phone there? Oh, sorry, this is Type-C, you can't charge phone. Oh, I need to find a Lightning cable. It creates all of this complexity because we don't have a common connector that we agreed on. There's downsides, I'm sure, that you can argue, well, now it stifles innovation or companies can't make a better connector, because you could also make the argument that the connector the EU chose for electric vehicles is kind of annoying. It's kind of clunky and it's kind of bulky compared to the connector Tesla came up with, the North America Charging Standard. That port is slimmer. That one is smaller. It can handle higher wattages. It can handle higher voltages. Um, it charges faster. It has a design that lets you lock the charge port into the car if the vehicle is locked, whereas CCS doesn't let you do that, which means even if you're charging and your car is locked, anybody can walk up to your car and unplug it and plug in their own car. So the way Alpha phrased that is CCS is not Karen proof. So if someone wants to just come up to your car while it's charging and unplug it and plug in their own car, they can do that. They can't do that with the North America charging standard because the lock is built into the charge port. So you could argue that, okay, there's less confusion and it's less annoying that they chose a common connector, but maybe there was a better connector that would have performed better, and they chose the wrong one. Now, to me, the argument is a lot easier for the USB-C case because USB-C, in my opinion, is better than Lightning in basically every way. There's not some significant advantage um, to keeping Lightning. Like Lightning doesn't allow for as fast a data transfer speed. The wattages are way slower. CCS and Tesla uh, both handle fairly high wattages, but Tesla has unveiled that their connector can handle vehicle to grid. It can handle 1,000 volts. It can handle 1 megawatt, which is like twice the speed of CCS, but most people don't need that much speed. Whereas Lightning to USB-C is like way different. It's USB-C can't just go like twice as fast as Lightning. It can go like 10 times as fast as Lightning, probably more. Um, what Rene Ritchie said was a good thing we did. The EU is mandating the USB-C port, but he thinks they should go further and make him factory mandates for how to do USB-C. Well, you got to start somewhere. I mean, I don't know exactly how to do it differently. So all USB-C cables have the same features, like different speeds. I don't know if necessarily that's necessary, to be honest. Because a lot of USB-C ports, like for instance, how you charge your mouse, are USB-C for like AirPods or something. They're not going to the pods themselves, they're going to the charge case. Like you don't need USB 3 speeds on every single USB-C accessory. So that might be unnecessarily driving the cost and complexity up for a bunch of accessories that don't need those data speeds. Um, so I understand why are there's a lot of companies that want to do USB-C at 2.0 because that is objectively cheaper than doing USB-C at 3.0. Um, but like to me, when Apple's already using the port in North America and across so many of their devices, switching to it is pretty obvious. It doesn't like there's not much of a advantage. I can't really think of any advantage Lightning has over Type C other than people just saying it's a little bit thinner. But it's one thing when we're talking about CCS versus NAX. NAX is like this big. You can hold it with one hand very easily. It's very easy to wrap your whole hand around. CCS is like this big. It's like CCS. It's not that big. CCS is like this. NAX is like this. Lightning is like, you know, you guys know what Lightning is. Here, I can compare the two. I've got both on my desk here. Like that, arguing that Lightning is too USB-C is too bulky when this is what we're talking about, like a few milliliters, not milliliters, sorry, a few millimeters. It doesn't want to focus, but I need macro mode, huh? Like this is not an extremely bulky port. Um, it's a little bit wider. Some people claim that USB-C is more prone to damage, which I have not seen any uh, long-term proof of. Every time I run a poll and ask people, have you had more Lightning cables die or more USB-C cables die? It's like 75% say Lightning cables are more prone to breaking than USB-C. But then occasionally I see someone claim, no, my USB-C cables all break and Lightning's great. I've had so many bad Lightning cables over the years and I've never had one bad USB-C cable. So I don't think it's a durability issue. We know there are Android phones that have been using USB-C for years and they still have great water resistance. It's more bulky when you compare it to a device's thickness. Yeah, but not. But Apple puts USB-C on devices thinner than iPhones. My iPad is 5.9 millimeters, which no iPhone to this day has ever been as thin as this iPad, but they put USB-C on it. So it's not like a limit of capability. It's not like, oh, it just takes up too much space. No, it doesn't. But You never know what you're getting with a USB-C cable. Some Amazon sellers lie about the specs of their cables. I've had to return several. Some aren't even reversible. Well, yeah, people are going to continue to lie on Amazon. EU's not going to be able to control that. I'm just saying those cables will get bad reviews, and hopefully people will return them because Amazon has a 30-day return policy. And you can just say, don't buy this one. But most people are probably just going to use the cable that came with the device. They'll charge their iPad with the cable it came with. They'll charge their phone with the cable it came with. You'll charge your MacBook with the cable it came with. So as long as those devices are coming with at least adapters, they will still work. I don't think mandating USB 3.0 speeds on everything is necessary. Mandating the feature doesn't necessarily mean mandating the speed, because when China, for example, makes a USB-C cable, they don't pull all of the teeth inside the Type-C cable just to save money and advertise to the consumer that they can do. Yeah, but again, you can't keep getting away with that. If you're falsely advertising a product, people are either going to return it or leave bad reviews saying it's not what it's advertised as. That's why we have review systems in place. If you're trying to go on third-party websites where they scam people to buy your USB-C cables, I guess, yeah, you might get scammed, but I don't think that's where most people are buying their Type-C cables. The center part of USB-C makes it far harder to clean without damaging it when compared to Lightning. Then why does my Lightning ports go bad so often? I feel like the Lightning cable, the Lightning port in general collects dust and lint a lot easier than Type-C does. Because I have tons of devices over the years that would get clogged up with lint and dust in the Lightning port, but I've never had a USB-C cable collect a bunch of dust and lint, not less than did. Apple's USB-C cables are too short. You're using the short ones. They sell long ones. You just don't like them. You just don't feel like buying them. Get a USB-C cable and charge it for someone like Apple or Samsung, then you know you're getting a good one. That's what I feel like most people do anyway. Or you buy it off Amazon and you buy it from one that has lots of proven reviews. Yes, clearly, that's a good one. Everyone likes it. Everyone's enjoying this product. It's a verified purchase by a lot of people. I don't think the EU needs to crack down on, but people in China are selling bad. It's like, okay, the EU's not going to stop that. You can get 2-meter USB-C cables from Apple. I have a couple of them. Yeah. The length is all dictated on which one you chose to go with. But yeah, I think in this particular case, if the EU was mandating Apple switch to micro USB, I wouldn't be for it. I would be against that. And I would say, no, that's a bad idea. And I hope the law doesn't get passed. But that's not what they're advocating for. I'm not advocating for government should have all control in all regions. I'm just saying the EU is pushing for the better charge port. They're right on this one. So that's why I'm in support of it. I'm like, yes, they should do it. Have you had a device that goes in your pocket with USB-C? That could be why it gets more lint with the Lightning ports. I mean, I've used Android phones, yes. Like, I have old Android phones that are Type-C that my old friends used, that they just didn't need anymore. And never was an issue with the charge port, but I have had that with iPhones many times. Bibisock says Lightning cables are very poorly designed. The pins turn black, and then you can only use one side of the cable or none of the sides if it happens on both sides. Correct. That happens to me all the time. And Lightning has never been bilateral. That's my big complaint with it, is like you can only have Lightning on one end of the cable. You already have USB-C on the other end of the cable. We're just saying, why don't you just put Type-C on both? That way you don't have to look at which side do I plug in. You just plug in whichever end it goes both ways. So in the same way that Lightning was better than 30-pin because it was reversible, I would say Type-C is better than Lightning because it is bilateral. It takes that another step further because we've never had Lightning to Lightning cables. Do you think you'd be able to keep your 13 Pro Max until the last year gets iOS support, or would you get too strong of an upgrade itch? Again, it's all dependent on what Apple comes up with. If they have an iPhone feature that I think is going to be very useful, very practical for me, that I could justify upgrading to, then I'll upgrade. But at this point, nothing that's rumored, nothing that I can think of they can add to the iPhone 15 or 16 that will make me think, yeah, I need this new iPhone. My 13 Pro Max isn't good enough anymore. At this point, I could, but I got to wait and see until I know what Apple's doing. Because just like the predictions video showed, I thought the iPhone 14 was just going to have a pill and nothing much different about it. But they turned that into the dynamic island thing. Now, that wasn't upgrade worthy for me, but it was a cool, recognizable, iconic feature that I didn't know about and I didn't expect, and Apple surprised me. So there could be another one of those features that's not leaked, that's not rumored, and then it actually happens, and we're like, oh, that's actually really cool. I want that. So I'm not gonna pre-decide anymore. That's my new decision after the iPhone 14 launches. I'm not gonna agree to not buy something before it's come out anymore. I'm just gonna wait to have Apple make their case, give it a fair, honest try, and then see if it's worth keeping at that point. It's a perfect example, though. Everyone used to think micro USB-C was the last port for a little while. Imagine if the EU mandated that garbage. I don't think it would have been passed. And it wasn't passed, remember? EU did try to mandate that, and the law didn't go through. The difference here is everyone is more on the same page about USB-C being better, and it'd be a different thing if Apple was using micro USB-C on their MacBooks and iPads already. That was the difference. The EU was trying to mandate a port that Apple wasn't using at all. Now they're trying to mandate a port that Apple's already using on half of their products, and they're already using it on the Lightning cables. All the Lightning cables have USB-C on the other end. They're just saying, can you just please go all the way and put it on both ends instead of just one? And again, if they were trying to mandate micro USB, I wouldn't agree with them. Again, I don't live in the EU. I don't vote on these things, so it doesn't matter what I think ultimately. But I'm saying the EU is trying to mandate a good idea that I'm in support of. I don't understand people's logic when they're like, well, yeah, it's a good idea, but we shouldn't get them used to it. What do you want to do? What are you going to do? Leave the EU then, I guess. Are you voting on this? It's like what I think as an American, if I say, yes, I want USB-C on the iPhone, this is a good idea. Does that mean the EU gets more power because I said that was a good idea? Like, no, that doesn't affect anything. I'm just in favor of laws that are going to improve products. And in my opinion, it's sad that the law even has to be passed. In my ideal world, Apple would have switched to Type-C a long time ago. We wouldn't even need a law. Like, the fact that this law has to exist is sad, in my opinion. I don't think Apple should be forced. They should have just done it. With 120 hertz, there's very little reason to upgrade. The 3x telephoto reach on my 14 Pro is better than I realized. Yeah, I mean, the 3X is, I honestly kind of miss 2X sometimes, but not enough to upgrade my whole phone. But I do agree that once you get a device with 120 hertz, it's very hard for it to feel old. Like, we're still using, on occasion, my wife is still using the 2017 iPad Pro, which is going to be 6 years old in a couple months because that was not late 2017. We got that like summer of 2017. And we still have it. And every time I use it, it's still got that ProMotion going for it. I'm like, this just does not feel like an old, slow product. Any display that's that smooth and that buttery is just like, yeah, this still feels brand new, even though it's a 5.5-year-old iPad. The design is a little dated, but the display is so good. It's like, I'm gonna have a hard time reaching a point where I find the 13 Pro Max old and sluggish. Unless that it just ages horribly. That's also another circumstance. I don't know if it's going to happen, but maybe by the time the iPhone 15 comes out, I'm going to have a bunch of software issues and like the phone is really buggy and it's crashing and it's just been a horrible experience. Maybe that would push me to upgrade and Apple will be accused of planned obsolescence or whatever. Tor says, I own the 13 Pro now. I will only upgrade it when iPhone gets USB-C and periscope telephoto camera. I'm not entirely sure we're getting periscope lens this year, but yeah, I'm hopeful for USB-C. Not confirmed. Definitely not a confirmed guarantee, but I think the likelihood has grown. Do you think that USB-C should have a barrel plug so it could be plugged in every direction? No, I think that USB-C has become so common and it's in our best interest to keep using the ports that we already have. You're asking if if it should have been a barrel plug. Barrel plugs have existed. I'm not sure if with that same shape you can get as thin as Type-C is. Because there's a certain number of pins that you're limited by. By having a certain amount of pins that align when you plug in a cable, you can hit certain power speeds and certain data speeds. I'm not sure if you just designed it to be another like beefed up version of the headphone jack, it would be as thin. Just have a circular port on everything. I don't know if you could do that. I'm not an engineer, but I'm content with the way it's designed currently. I don't think there's an inherent design with the shape. It's like, okay, you know how to plug it in. It goes in either way, and it's bilateral. Could we done it in a barrel plug, maybe, but you likely would have had to make it kind of big, and that would have made it harder to fit on things like iPads and phones. You wouldn't be able to have so many data pins. Yeah, I think there's something to the shape that it needs to be that way. But I am in favor of let's get everybody on board. Let's switch as many things as possible to Type C. This is the best port, and I love the idea in the future someday, many many years from now, where you don't have different types of, like, at least you don't have different shapes of ports. Maybe we have high speed ports and low speed ports, but for the most part we just have the port. Everything is Type C, and you just have the cable, which is Type C. And maybe when the manufacturing of those cables and ports gets cheap enough, we could get to the point where there's not even a difference in ports, and everything is just the port and the cable, and you just got to plug devices into each other, and you don't have to think about which cable you're using or which port you're using. Um, that would be wonderful if we could get that. Um, let's see. I think Apple's going to hold off as long as possible on the USB-C push. They don't legally have to until December 2024 after the iPhone release schedule. There's a chance of that. You're right. But I also find it bizarre, Springles, that they switched the Siri remote to USB-C this year. They literally didn't change anything to USB-C other than iPads until the law was passed. As soon as the law was passed, they switched the Siri remote. Very little changes. Nothing about it really changed. It didn't redesign it or anything. It's the exact same Siri remote. It just happens to now have USB-C. Why that product, of all products, to adopt Type-C? To me, it makes more sense that Apple would switch as soon as possible once you know you're going to have to switch. Like there's no choice anymore. It'd be better to switch ahead of time and make it look like an intentional thing. Like you did it early, and they'll brag about it. They'll say, this is clearly the better port, and we can charge the iPhone faster, and it has faster data transfer speeds. I could be wrong on that, but that's my guess, is that they're going to try to get ahead of it. That way they don't push it off to the last minute as kind of a middle finger to the law. It would be better for Apple to come forward and say, yes, we chose to switch to Type-C. We didn't have to. We think this is the better port, and this is going to make the iPhone do much more things, rather than say, well, we had to do it, so I guess we're going to switch in 2026 or whatever, 2025, when it's officially time to switch over, and it would be illegal to sell. There's also a chance they could just switch to Type-C in Europe, but not in the US or the rest of the world. Again, it's possible, but I don't think it would be a good look for them. Bibisock says, I used a 2016 iPhone SE for over 5 years and it didn't become unstable. See, I just know people that ran into a lot of issues with iPhones after 2 or 3 years and it became unreliable. I don't know if it's just that they needed a battery replacement, but yeah, I also hear people, and I know people personally that still, like, I have a family friend that still uses an iPhone 6 and he's very happy with it. He has no complaints, and he's replaced the battery like twice, but still, like, not running the latest iOS, doesn't care. Camera's good enough for him. He's happy, and I admired that. I was like, I want to be more like this guy. He can live with an iPhone 6 and just be totally comfortable. That phone is getting close to 10 years old. It's amazing. Oh my God. Ben, what did you do? What did it... Ben Rayner gifted 5 Tailosive Tech memberships. That is far too generous, Ben. Thank you. Wow. Got a bunch of people were gifted. That's very kind. Jeez. That's surprising. Now we're going to hit the AirPower all over again. Are you suggesting if Apple went all in USB-C, the law would not exist? Probably not. The law is mostly about the iPhone. That's the biggest offender on the list of devices that don't have the common connector. Maybe there's a few exceptions, but I think the EU probably wouldn't pass a law if all smartphones had Type-C anyway. I know the law applies to headphones and keyboards and mice as well, but that was not what was causing most of the e-waste. It was the iPhone. Yeah, Mike always gets one somehow. I think there's a specific way to have it set up. Well, my next question is, what membership tier did they give away? It doesn't tell me. Do they have Tailosive Tech Plus? If they have Tailosive Tech Pro, I feel very bad for Ben, because he just spent a lot of money. I'm beginning to think this algorithm isn't purely random. That's true. They keep giving it all to the same people. I guess you're just likely to be on stream at the same time as Ben. Let me check the. Oh, he did get pro. Oh no, Ben, no! What did you do? He gifted 5 Tailosive Tech Pro memberships. Oh, jeez. We got a lot of people to add to the credits now. Oh boy. Okay, I gotta update the outro credit. Well, that's very generous of you, Ben. I don't know if that was intentional or not, but everyone who got the membership got the pro version. Does this mean I have to follow Mike on Twitter? Oh, brother. I don't want to. Okay. Tag me on Twitter. Okay, he says, I don't have Twitter. Don't worry about following me. Okay, well, if you're on Twitter and you have Tailosive Tech Pro now, just tag me with proof. Just saying that's your channel name or whatever. But thank you. Thank you so much, Ben. That was very generous. Oh, geez. We got to hike up this stream with the hype stream. I guess so, but I didn't want the Apple sheep to follow me anyway. Yeah, I'm going to sign up, but I'm going to specifically ask you not to follow. Are you going to do post-credit scenes in your videos? Ooh, that's an interesting idea. If I can think of a good one, maybe. But yes. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. I think I'll have some lunch now, but I appreciate you. I'm sorry for all the live streams if you hate live streams, because honestly, the tech news, I won't lie, is kind of dry. But someone asked a good question earlier that I think I want to add to the list. I'm not sure when we'll make it, but didn't I can't remember. Someone asked earlier, and I saw the comment, but we were talking about something else, so I didn't read it. But someone said, what's the cheapest way to do an Apple ecosystem? I think that might be a fun challenge, because I'm basically just going to do all Amazon renewed. But I'll be like, if you want to get into the Apple ecosystem for cheap, Amazon renewed is your best friend. But I think it'd be kind of fun to do a video to see how cheap you can build an ecosystem. I've jumped ship from Twitter to Mastodon. Well, I hope you enjoy it over there. I'm not going. I can't keep up with all these social media sites. But there was like 5 Twitter alternatives, and half of them died. And I hope Mastodon survives. I'm not rooting for anyone to fail, but I just think that the only reason anyone knows what Mastodon is because Elon bought Twitter. And I honestly don't think they're going to get as big as Twitter anyway. And I'm mostly interested in Twitter right now because they say they're going to turn Twitter into a YouTube alternative with video monetization and content posting. So I'll add that to the list, but tech news is rather dry right now. There is not a very large amount of news stories going around. So seeing how cheap we can get a good, decent ecosystem might be kind of fun. eBay is more trustworthy. Really? I feel like I know a lot of people that have had good experiences with Amazon renewed, but not as many with eBay. Mastodon has a terrible UI and like a total of 5 people use it. It's got to be more than 5. I know a lot of people that have left Twitter, which is fine. I don't care if you want to leave for whatever reason. There's a lot of I don't like Instagram either, and I'm sure there's a lot of good things about Instagram, and a lot of people like using Instagram, but I don't want to be on there. Same thing with Facebook. But because I don't like Zuckerberg, so if you don't like Elon for whatever reason, you don't want to use Twitter. I get it. I'm totally there. Thanks for a really awesome time. If you're brave enough to say goodbye, life will reward you with a new hello. Oh, that's a fun fortune cookie phrase. Thank you, Edward. But anyway, yeah. I know that when I talk about Twitter on tech videos, not that many people care. I think moving forward, I'll probably, if I talk about Twitter again, I'll put it on a Talks channel or something. Twitter's actually performing better now. It has higher activity and higher usage than it did pre-Elon, but eBay has their own official refurbished program, and that comes with a 1-year warranty. Okay, maybe I got to look into that then. Very good customer service. I just have the same things with Amazon. If you have problems, I know so many people that have returned products on Amazon all the time with very good return policies and refunds. But I'm glad to hear eBay's is good. Say hello to my new social media platform, Loch Ness. It's nearly impossible to find. Oh, that's good. Nearly? Why don't you just say it is impossible? Anyway, thank you all for watching. Thank you, Ben Rayner, seriously, so much for the extreme generosity. Hope you guys have an excellent rest of your day. Bye-bye.